Winter in medieval Europe could kill you if your house wasn't built right. When temperatures dropped, peasants couldn't just turn up the heat or run to the store for supplies. They had to figure out how to keep their families alive using whatever materials they could find nearby. The building methods they came up with were surprisingly clever. These weren't professional builders, just regular people trying not to freeze to death. They used wood framing, stuffed gaps with moss and mud, and passed down their techniques from parents to children. Get it wrong, and you'd wake up to ice forming inside your house. Get it right, and you had a decent shot at making it to spring. Some of these techniques are still useful today, which is why historians and builders occasionally look back at them, but mostly it's just a reminder that people have always been pretty resourceful when their lives depend on it. Here's what life was really like for medieval peasants, fighting to survive brutal winters through shelter design alone. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in England listen to history stories to sleep. Okay, tonight it's medieval winter shelters, but before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes snap open in the darkness. The bitter cold hits your face first. The only part of your body exposed to the air. Your breath forms a small cloud that hangs visibly above you. The rest of your family is still asleep, huddled together on the raised sleeping platform near the ceiling where the precious warm air collects. It's your turn to stoke the fire before it dies completely. You're probably thinking, just build a fire, how hard could it be? But when it's minus whatever and your fingers are too numb to move, it's pretty damn hard. The wrong move means your entire family freezes to death before dawn. Carefully you slide from beneath the heavy fur coverings. Your feet touch the packed earth floor, sending a shock of cold through your body. The single-room dwelling is dark except for the faint orange glow of embers in the central hearth. The walls of massive logs surround you, each one at least 40 centimeters thick. These aren't just walls, they're the difference between life and death. The year is 1263, and you're a peasant in northern Europe. Winter isn't just cold, it's your most relentless enemy. Hurry up with that fire, your wife mumbles from beneath the furs, the little one starting to shiver. Stay with me here, because this next part is wild. These people weren't just surviving, they were engineering solutions that modern architects still study. Every single aspect of this humble dwelling was designed with brutal precision for one purpose: trapping heat. You kneel before the hearth, your movements careful and deliberate. Precious firewood is stacked nearby, each piece split and dried months ago when summer still warmed the land. You select smaller pieces first, arranging them carefully over the embers. Your grandfather taught you this technique, just as his grandfather taught him. In your head, you're doing the math. 3 months of this? Impossible. And yet, somehow, you've survived winters before. You know what to do. The shelter around you isn't just thrown together. It's the result of thousands of years of trial and error, knowledge passed from generation to generation. Each feature represents a lesson learned through suffering. I spent way too long researching medieval winter shelters, like concerningly long. And the most fascinating thing I discovered was how these weren't random structures. They were sophisticated survival machines where literally every detail mattered. The location alone was a science. Your ancestors didn't just plop a house down anywhere. They specifically chose south-facing slopes, never the top of a hill where winds would tear through everything. and never the bottom of a valley where cold air and moisture collected. They found that sweet spot midway up a slope. The medieval builders had a name for it, the comfort zone, where the forces of nature worked for humans, not against them. They observed how warm air flows, how moisture behaves, how wind patterns develop. They were practically climate engineers without any formal education. "Is it catching?" your wife asks, her voice muffled by the firs. "Almost," you mutter, leaning closer to blow gently on the kindling. I know. Sounds dramatic, right? But hear me out. When the difference between life and death is literally the thickness of your wall, these details matter. Court records from the time actually mention entire families found frozen to death in poorly constructed homes. Not a great way to go. Your little hut is positioned perfectly, sheltered from the brutal north winds by the hillside, with just enough exposure to catch what little winter sunlight appears during the short days. Nearby, a small stream flows, carefully chosen because it's protected enough to not freeze completely, ensuring water access even in the deepest winter. The forest edge is just 100 paces away, close enough to drag home firewood without exhausting yourself, but not so close that falling trees threaten your home during storms. Oh, and get this. Archaeologists found that medieval peasants would specifically locate their homes based on at least a dozen critical factors: water access, wind protection, sun exposure, firewood availability, drainage patterns. This wasn't random. This was survival science. The kindling catches, small flames licking upward. Relief floods through you. A fire means one more day of life. Your oldest son stirs on the sleeping platform. "Papa," he whispers. "Go back to sleep," you tell him. "I've got it." The walls of your dwelling are a marvel of insulation technology. From the outside, it might look like a simple log structure, but there's nothing simple about it. Those massive logs were chosen specifically for their thickness, allowing them to absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night like a giant battery. Between each log you've packed a mixture of moss, clay, wood chips, and wool scraps. This isn't just stuffing. It's a carefully developed insulation compound that prevents even the slightest draft. Every gap, every potential crack, has been meticulously sealed. In fact, researchers examining preserved medieval dwellings found evidence of what they call obsessive sealing, where literally every microscopic gap was plugged with some kind of natural insulation material. No, but seriously, I looked into this, and there were actually medieval laws in some regions that required new houses to pass smoke tests, where neighbours would check for leaks. If smoke escaped through your walls, you failed, and you had to fix it before winter. The floor beneath your feet isn't just dirt. It's been carefully trampled and mixed with clay and sand until it formed a dense, smooth surface. Beneath this visible floor lies a layer of insulation, dried leaves, moss, and sawdust, creating a barrier against the cold creeping up from the ground. Your shelter's design considers even the invisible enemy, the cold that seeps upward from the earth itself. The flames grow stronger now, casting flickering shadows across the single room. Your wife's face appears from beneath the firs, watching you with tired eyes. "Think we have enough wood for the month?" she asks. You nod, though you're not entirely sure. Last winter the final weeks were desperate, burning parts of furniture, even door frames from abandoned homes, which, okay, fair, desperate times. Imagine your electricity bill skyrocketing and you start unplugging things. Now imagine your heat source running out entirely when it's -20 outside. That's why wood management was literally life or death. You're thinking, why not just move somewhere warmer? Yeah, that wasn't exactly an option back then. Peasants were tied to the land, owing service to local lords. You didn't just pick up and move to Spain for the winter. Even the roof above your head is a technological masterpiece disguised as simple construction. It's built with a steep pitch, carefully designed so snow slides off rather than accumulates, though a thin layer is actually desirable as natural insulation. The roof consists of multiple layers. First birch bark that prevents water penetration, then thick moss or hay for insulation, topped with turf, straw, or reeds. The turf option was particularly brilliant. It would sprout and become a living roof, with plant roots binding everything together into a waterproof, windproof shield. And in case you're wondering, yes, archaeologists have found these multi-layered roofs preserved in peat bogs, showing the incredible sophistication of what we thought were primitive buildings. The Museum of Medieval Life in Oslo actually has a reconstruction where you can see these layers. The guide told me people constantly underestimate just how advanced these techniques were. Wait, it gets better. The door to your home isn't just a slab of wood. It's a double-door system creating what modern architects would call an airlock. This vestibule prevents precious heat from escaping every time someone enters or exits. Your home's entrance has a high threshold too, specifically designed to block the creeping cold that flows along the ground like invisible water. Windows? Rare luxuries. Instead, you have small openings covered with oiled parchment or animal bladders, natural translucent materials that allow some light while minimizing heat loss. These primitive windows face south only to capture the maximum sunlight. The smoke from your fire rises toward the ceiling, some escaping through a small hole, some lingering to warm the upper portion of the room where your family sleeps. This isn't an oversight, it's intentional. The sleeping area is positioned where warm air naturally collects. The fire is strong now, warmth gradually pushing back against the cold. Your wife slides from beneath the covers to help prepare the morning meal, a simple porridge of stored grains. "We should check the roof today," she says. "I thought I heard dripping yesterday." You nod grimly. A leaking roof in winter could mean death. Every element of your shelter requires constant maintenance, another full-time job on top of finding food and tending animals. Fun fact that's not actually fun. Medieval peasants spent about 30% of their waking hours just maintaining their homes during winter. It wasn't build and forget. It was build and constantly fix or die. By now, the interior of your home has warmed enough that you no longer see your breath. The children stir on the sleeping platform, your youngest daughter's face appearing first, her cheeks flushed with sleep. "Is it still snowing?" she asks. You move to the small window opening and wipe away the frost that's formed overnight. Outside, the world is a blanket of white, snow piled high against the north wall of your dwelling. The sun isn't up yet, but the eastern sky shows hints of light. "Yes," you tell her, "but less than yesterday." The snow outside isn't just a beautiful winter scene. It's an active threat that requires management. Too much snow against the walls can eventually cause structural damage. Too little on the roof means less insulation. You'll spend part of your day shoveling paths, clearing strategic areas, maintaining your lifeline to water and firewood. Medieval villagers actually developed complex snow management systems. They would intentionally pile snow in certain places as windbreaks and insulation, while keeping other areas meticulously clear. The morning routine begins as it has every day this winter. Your wife stirs the porridge cooking in a clay pot suspended over the fire. Your oldest son checks the small stable attached to the house where your single cow provides both milk and additional body heat. Another intentional design feature. Unlike your cozy bed right now, with its even temperature and plush pillows, these medieval sleeping arrangements were all about practicality. You slept fully clothed, often with your day clothes still on, huddled together for warmth. Your daughter joins her mother by the fire while your son brings in an armload of firewood, carefully stacked beside the hearth to dry. Even this detail matters. Wet wood produces less heat and more smoke. Survival in medieval winter wasn't just about the big things like shelter construction. It was about 1,000 tiny daily decisions that each contributed to staying alive. For instance, the firewood. You wouldn't just grab any fallen tree. You'd select specific types of wood known for burning longer and hotter, cut it to precise lengths for your hearth, split it along the grain for optimal burning, and then stack it in a way that continued the drying process. The miller's roof collapsed last night, your son says quietly as he arranges the wood. A chill that has nothing to do with the temperature runs through you. The millers live just 3 homes away. Their dwelling is newer than yours, built only 10 years ago when they arrived in the village. Were they inside? Your wife asks, her hand pausing with the stirring stick. Your son nods grimly. The father broke his leg. They're staying with the Smiths now. In today's episode of Humans Are Weird, despite the harshness of medieval winter, community bonds were incredibly strong. Studies of medieval villages show that families would take in neighbours who lost their homes, even when it meant severely limited resources for everyone. Your wife ladles porridge into wooden bowls, handing them around. The food is hot, warming your hands through the wooden container. Steam rises from the simple meal, carrying the subtle scent of herbs added to prevent the monotony of eating the same food day after day. As the pale winter sun finally breaches the horizon, its light filters through the parchment window covering, casting a soft glow across the room. Despite the brutal conditions outside, there's a moment of peace inside your shelter. This is the reality of medieval winter survival. Constant work, constant vigilance, but also moments of simple human connection. Your family gathered around the fire, alive for another day because of knowledge passed down through generations, encoded in the very structure around you. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about medieval winter shelters. They weren't just buildings, they were physical manifestations of accumulated wisdom, each log and layer telling the story of what humans learned about surviving impossible conditions. As you finish your porridge, you're already mentally planning the day's tasks. The roof needs checking. The north wall might need additional moss packed into any gaps that have formed as the logs contracted in the cold. The pathway to the stream needs clearing. Winter survival was never a single event, but a season-long marathon of maintenance and vigilance. The Miller family's roof collapse wasn't bad luck. It was likely the result of small oversights accumulating over time. Perhaps they didn't angle the roof steeply enough. Maybe they used green wood that warped as it dried. Maybe they didn't clear snow frequently enough. In the harsh mathematics of medieval winter, small mistakes compound into catastrophic failures. You set your empty bowl aside and reach for your heaviest outer garment, a thick woolen cloak lined with fur scraps. Outside, temperatures are well below freezing, the kind of cold that makes exposed skin burn before it goes numb. "I'll check on the Millers," you tell your wife. "See if they need anything." She nods, already gathering scraps for the midday meal. Nothing is wasted in winter. Even porridge stuck to the sides of bowls is carefully scraped away and saved. As you prepare to step outside into the brutal cold, you take one last look at your shelter, this seemingly simple structure that represents the pinnacle of medieval survival engineering. Every beam, every handful of moss, every layer of roof material stands between your family and death. It's not just a house. It's a life-preserving machine built from nothing but natural materials and hard-won knowledge. You open the inner door, step into the small vestibule, close it behind you, and then brace yourself before opening the outer door to face the winter morning. Another day in the endless battle against the cold. And as you step outside, the full reality hits you. This isn't just one winter to endure. This is your life, year after year, generation after generation. The knowledge of how to build these shelters isn't just helpful information. It's the only thing keeping humanity alive in these northern regions. Medieval peasants didn't just survive winter. They mastered it through ingenuity, observation, and the accumulated wisdom of countless frigid seasons. Their shelters weren't primitive. They were perfectly adapted solutions to one of humanity's greatest challenges, surviving when nature itself seems determined to freeze you to death. The frigid air hits like a slap across the face when you step outside. Even through your fur-lined boots, you can feel the biting cold of the packed snow. Your breath freezes instantly into a cloud of ice crystals that hang in the air before you. The village looks almost abandoned at first glance. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin grey columns, but there's little other sign of life. Smart folks are staying inside unless absolutely necessary. From your position halfway up the hillside, you can see the entire settlement. About 20 dwellings clustered together, each one positioned with the same careful attention to the landscape. None sits directly at the bottom of the valley where deadly cold air pools at night. None perches foolishly at the hilltop where winds would tear them apart. You pull your cloak tighter and begin trudging through knee-deep snow toward the smith's home, where the millers are supposedly staying. The snow isn't just deep, it's crusty on top, breaking under each step in a way that requires lifting your knees almost to your chest just to move forward. After only 50 paces, you're already breathing hard. "Osbert, over here!" You turn to see Edgar, the village tanner, waving from beside what looks like a small hill with smoke rising from the top. But it's no hill, it's a dugout, one of the earthen dwellings favoured by the poorest villagers, or those who arrive too late to claim prime building spots. "You heading to check on the millers?" Edgar calls. "Aye," you respond, changing direction to meet him. "I actually interviewed an archaeologist who specialises in medieval housing. She laughed when I asked if dugouts were just holes in the ground. Turns out they were sophisticated underground homes that sometimes worked better than above-ground structures." Edgar waves you toward the smoke hole in his dwelling. "Come warm yourself before going further. It's brutal out here today." You've never been inside Edgar's home before. As a tanner, his profession makes him something of an outcast due to the stench of his work. But in winter, with tanning operations suspended, he's just another villager fighting to survive. You follow him to what appears to be a mound of earth with a crude wooden door built into one side. Snow covers most of the structure, making it nearly invisible against the landscape. Only the smoke rising from a small hole at the top gives it away. "Watch your head," Edgar warns as he opens the door, revealing a short tunnel that slopes downward. The moment you enter, the difference in temperature is shocking. Outside, the air was cold enough to freeze spit before it hit the ground. Inside this earthen corridor, it's cool but not freezing. Your face says it all, Edgar laughs. First time in a proper dugout? You nod, ducking to follow him down the corridor that opens into a single room about 15 feet across. The space is nearly round, with walls of packed earth reinforced with timber supports. The ceiling is low enough that Edgar, a tall man, needs to stoop slightly. Most folks think we poor sods suffer down here, Edgar says, gesturing around his home. Truth is, I use half the firewood you do in that fancy log house of yours. And he's right. The temperature inside the dugout is surprisingly comfortable. A small fire burns in a central hearth, but it's not the roaring blaze you need to maintain in your own home. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture of why these dugouts were actually genius. At about 1 to 2 meters below ground level, the earth maintains a constant temperature of around 10 degrees, 50 degrees, even when the air above is far below freezing. That's like having natural insulation on all sides. The dugout's genius lies in its use of the earth's inherent heat. While your above-ground dwelling fights constant heat loss through walls, roof, and floor, Edgar's home starts from a base temperature that never falls below freezing. A woman emerges from a shadowy corner. Edgar's wife, Matilda. She's grinding something in a wooden mortar. "Brought a visitor, have you?" she asks, not looking up from her work. "He's checking on the Millers," Edgar explains. "Thought he might appreciate warming up first." Matilda nods, still focused on her grinding. Their roof wasn't built right. Green wood. "I told Agnes last summer it would cause problems." Construction errors were a death sentence. Archaeological digs have uncovered collapsed structures with occupants still inside. Entire families found huddled together, killed by structural failures during winter storms. "Would you like some broth?" Edgar offers, gesturing to a clay pot suspended over the fire. "Turnip and barley, nothing special, but it's hot." Your stomach growls at the mention of food, but you're also fascinated by the dugout's construction. The walls aren't just raw earth. They're carefully lined with woven sticks covered in a mixture of clay and straw, a technique called wattle and daub. The floor is tamped earth covered with straw, which provides insulation and can be replaced when soiled. What I find crazy is that these underground homes sometimes had specialized niches cut into the walls for storage, sleeping, and even primitive refrigeration. They weren't just emergency shelters. People lived in them full-time for generations. "Go ahead. Ask," Edgar chuckles, noticing your curious gaze. Everyone wants to know the same things about dugouts. "You don't get flooded out during spring thaw?" you ask. Edgar points to a small channel cut into the floor that runs around the perimeter and disappears into one wall. Drainage. The whole structure sits on a slight slope, and I've got channels that carry water away downhill. You accept a wooden bowl of broth from Matilda, who finally looks at you directly. "The real question," she says with unexpected authority, "is why more people don't live like this. Half the wood consumption, no worries about roof collapse, and come summer, it stays cool when your house bakes like an oven." You sip the broth, which is thin but warming. "Then why didn't you build on my side of the village? The soil there would have been easier to dig." Edgar and Matilda exchange knowing looks. "Status," Edgar says simply. "A house above ground means you've arrived. A dugout marks you as poor, no matter how practical it might be. And that's the weird thing. Archaeologists have found that dugout homes were often more effective survival structures than fancy above-ground houses. But social pressure pushed people toward less practical housing. just to show off their status. The air in the dugout is noticeably different from your home. There's no smoke hanging near the ceiling despite the central fire. Instead, it rises through a hole in the center of the roof, which is covered by a simple wood and hide flap that can be adjusted to control the draft. How do you manage the smoke so well, you ask? My place fills with it on still days. Edgar grins, revealing several missing teeth. Ah, now there's the real secret of a good dugout. Look there and there. He points to small openings near the floor on opposite sides of the circular room. Air comes in low, gets heated by the fire, rises up and out. Simple as that. Your chimney only pulls smoke out the top, which means you're losing all your hot air too. It's basically the same principle used in modern passive heating systems. The physics of thermal circulation was something medieval builders understood through trial and error, centuries before science formally explained it. The millers should be at the smiths still, Matilda says, changing the subject, unless they've moved to the church. The village church, with its stone walls, was the community refuge during emergencies. Though cold and drafty compared to a well-built home, its structure could accommodate several families when necessary. I should continue on, you say, reluctantly handing back the empty bowl. The dugout's warmth is tempting, but you have obligations. Mind if I join you? Edgar asks. I need to speak with the Smiths about a hide tanning come spring. Together you climb back up the sloped entrance. The cold hits even harder after the relative comfort of the dugout. As you trudge through the snow, Edgar points to a small structure near the frozen stream, little more than a lean-to with walls of tightly woven branches covered in hides. Hunters built that last week, he explains. 3 men from the next village over, tracking deer. They slept in that, you ask incredulously. The structure looks barely sufficient to block wind, let alone provide warmth. With a good fire in front, it works well enough for a night or two, Edgar says. They position it to reflect heat back inside. Not something you'd want to live in, but it keeps you alive when caught away from home. These temporary shelters weren't just thrown together randomly. They followed specific designs tested over centuries. A good hunter could construct one in under an hour that would prevent freezing to death in even the harshest conditions. The key was orientation, always built with the back to the prevailing wind and the opening facing south to catch sunlight. The principle of the reflector fire was essential, building the fire just outside the shelter's mouth with a log or stone backstop positioned to direct heat inward. You spot several more such temporary structures scattered around the village periphery, some used by trappers checking snare lines, others by woodcutters who found themselves too far from home as darkness fell. Someone from your house coming this way, Edgar says, pointing toward a figure struggling through the snow. It's your son, moving with the urgency of youth despite the challenging conditions. Father, he calls when close enough. Mother says come quickly. Something's wrong with the north wall. A jolt of fear shoots through you. Wall problems in midwinter could spell disaster. The millers? Edgar asks. Go, you tell him. I need to check this. Edgar nods, understanding. In winter, your home's integrity comes before all else. You follow your son back up the hillside, moving as fast as the deep snow allows. When you reach your dwelling, your wife is standing outside despite the cold, examining the north-facing wall with obvious concern. There, she points to a section where the carefully packed moss and clay mixture between logs has fallen away, leaving a gap through which the brutal north wind freely passes. It wasn't like this yesterday, she says. I felt the draft this morning but couldn't find the source until now. You run your fingers over the damaged section. The material is frozen solid, which shouldn't happen. The insulation between logs should remain relatively warm from the house's interior heat. The wall's frozen through here, you say grimly. We're losing heat somewhere else that's allowing this section to freeze. This is what made winter survival so complex. One small problem quickly cascaded into bigger ones. A single cold spot in a wall meant heat was escaping, which meant more firewood consumption, which meant more trips to the forest, which meant greater exposure risk. File this under things that shouldn't have worked but did. The mix of clay, moss, animal hair, and sometimes even manure that medieval people used between logs created an insulation that modern lab tests show was surprisingly effective, sometimes comparable to modern fiberglass in terms of R value. We need to heat clay, you tell your family, and gather more moss from the forest edge. In this cold, your wife questions, though she already knows the answer. If we don't fix it now, it'll only get worse. By tomorrow, that whole section could be compromised. As if to emphasize your point, a gust of wind sends a visible spray of snow through the gap in the logs. Your daughter emerges from the house carrying your heaviest fur mittens. I've already started heating water, she says. These winter repair operations were choreographed like complex dances, with each family member having specific roles honed over years of experience. Without formal education, medieval families passed down construction knowledge that was sophisticated enough to keep them alive in conditions that would kill most modern people within hours. While your wife and daughter begin mixing clay with straw and moss inside by the fire, you and your son examine the exterior wall more carefully. Look there, your son points up toward the roof junction. The water damage. You follow his gesture and see it. A dark stain trailing down from where the roof meets the wall. A minor leak has allowed water to penetrate the logs, freezing and expanding until it pushed out the insulation. The problem's not the wall, you realize, it's the roof edge. So now you're working in brutal cold to repair a critical part of your shelter that's 15 feet off the ground. Without modern equipment, with materials you have to improvise on the spot, while the temperature is low enough to freeze your fingers in minutes of exposure. This kind of emergency repair was painfully common. Evidence from preserved medieval homes shows frequent patches and repairs, sometimes several layers deep, indicating ongoing battles against the elements. Your son is already moving toward the woodpile to select the tall poles you use for roof repairs. He knows the routine without being told. In winter, these skills are drilled into children from the moment they can understand instructions. We'll need birch bark, you call to him, and more moss. Inside, you find your wife and daughter working efficiently, mixing repair materials by the fire. Roof leak, you explain curtly. North edge. Your wife's face grows more concerned. Above the food storage? You nod grimly. I'll check for damage, she says, moving toward the corner where winter provisions are carefully stored. Food security was as important as structural integrity. A family might survive a partially damaged home, but spoiled winter provisions meant certain starvation before spring. Medieval food storage was an art form requiring specific conditions. Most homes had dedicated storage areas where temperature and humidity were carefully controlled. Grains were kept in sealed containers to prevent rodents and moisture. Root vegetables were buried in sand or straw. Smoked and salted meats hung from rafters. Your wife returns looking relieved. The stores are dry. We caught it in time. Within an hour, your family has assembled everything needed for the repair. Birch bark to create a new waterproof layer, moss and clay mixture for insulation, and long poles with hooks fashioned from antler tines for working at height. The repair operation begins with you and your son outside, while your wife and daughter work from inside the dwelling. Using the poles, you carefully position new pieces of birch bark under the damaged roof edge, creating an overlapping pattern that sheds water away from the vulnerable wall junction. From inside, your wife applies the warm clay and moss mixture to the gap between logs, packing it tightly and smoothing it to prevent future water penetration. "Pass more moss up," your son calls, his hands visibly red despite the mittens. Your daughter appears at the door with a basket of dried moss gathered months ago and stored specifically for winter repairs. These repair materials weren't random. Each was selected for specific properties: birch bark for its natural waterproofing, moss for its insulation value and ability to expand when wet, clay for its binding properties and impermeability when dried. The work is painfully slow in the bitter cold. Every few minutes you and your son must return inside to warm your hands by the fire, prevent frostbite, and regain dexterity. By midday, with the repair still underway, neighbours begin to appear with offers of help. This wasn't just kindness, it was survival strategy. In medieval winter communities, everyone understood that their fate was interconnected. Today your roof, tomorrow theirs. "Heard you've got trouble," says Gunther, a burly carpenter from down the hill. Without waiting for details, he simply picks up one of the repair poles and looks to you for direction. Soon there are 5 men working on your roof while women from neighbouring households bring hot broth and additional repair materials. The social coordination of medieval winter villages was remarkable. Archaeological evidence shows tool sharing, labour exchange, and resource pooling were common practices that increased everyone's chance of survival. "Same thing happened to us last winter," Gunther comments as you both warm your hands by your hearth. "Water gets in, freezes, pushes everything apart." "Should have checked it earlier," you admit. "Saw the icicle formation yesterday, but didn't think much of it." Gunther nods understanding. Always the small things that kill you in winter. By late afternoon, with the one winter sun already low in the sky, the repair is complete. The roof edge has been reinforced with additional birch bark layers, the wall gap has been filled with fresh insulation mixture, and the interior shows no signs of drafts. The neighbours gradually return to their own dwellings as darkness approaches, each carrying small tokens of thanks: a bundle of kindling, a portion of preserved fruits, a handful of dried herbs. These weren't just gifts, but installments in the complex social insurance system that enabled community survival. You stand outside as the last light fades, inspecting the repair work with critical eyes. It will hold, at least until spring allows for more permanent fixes. Your wife appears in the doorway, silhouetted by firelight from within. "Come inside before you freeze," she calls. "Food's ready." As you turn to enter your home, you glance toward the smith's dwelling where the Miller family is sheltering after their disaster. Their roof collapse wasn't just bad luck. It was the culmination of small errors and oversights that couldn't be afforded in winter. Tomorrow you'll finally check on them, but tonight is for ensuring your own family's shelter remains secure. In the brutal equation of medieval winter, you had to secure your own survival before helping others. Your repaired dwelling stands as testament to generations of accumulated knowledge. Knowledge that means the difference between life and death during the unforgiving northern winter. Morning comes with that distinctive winter silence, the kind of quiet that seems to swallow all sound, broken only by the occasional crack of a frozen tree branch surrendering to the weight of snow. After yesterday's repair work, your home has maintained its warmth through the night. the newly patched wall holding firm against the bitter cold. Your wife is already up, coaxing the banked coals from last night back to life. The hearth is the true centre of your world during winter, not just physically at the middle of your one-room home, but the core around which all activities revolve. I'll check on the Millers today, you tell her, watching as she skillfully arranges small sticks over the glowing embers. She nods without looking up, her focus entirely on the crucial task of reviving the fire. Take some of the dried apples. Agnes always had a sweet tooth. While she works, you retrieve a small cloth bundle from the storage corner. Food gifts were more than courtesy in winter. They were acknowledgements of shared vulnerability, investments in the social bonds that kept communities alive. You're thinking, is it worth giving away food when we barely have enough? But these social connections are another form of survival insurance. The family you help today might save your life tomorrow. By the time you're ready to leave, the fire is burning steadily, and your wife has hung a pot of porridge to cook. Your children remain asleep on the raised sleeping platform near the ceiling, the warmest spot in the house where hot air naturally collects. Be back before midday, your wife cautions, storm clouds coming from the north. Outside, the morning is breathtakingly cold but clear, the snow from yesterday now frozen into a crust that mostly supports your weight, making the walk to the Smiths' home much easier than yesterday's trudge. The Smiths' dwelling sits on the eastern edge of the village, a large structure that serves as both home and workshop. As the village blacksmith, Godwin Smith enjoys higher status than most, reflected in his house, nearly twice the size of yours, with a separate area for metalworking. When you approach, you notice the smith's chimney producing a distinctive white smoke, the sign of a well-managed fire burning hot and clean. Amateur historians often get this wrong, thinking medieval homes were constantly belching black smoke. But black smoke meant wasted fuel, and no one could afford to waste anything in winter. You knock on the outer door, stamping your feet to bring feeling back to your toes while waiting. The door opens to reveal Godwin's youngest daughter, maybe 7 years old. She stares at you for a moment before calling back into the house. "Father, it's Osbert from the hillside." Godwin appears moments later, his powerful blacksmith's frame filling the doorway. Despite the winter pause in his trade, his hands and forearms remain muscled from years at the forge. Come in," he says, stepping aside. "We were just breaking fast." The Smith home's entryway is a proper vestibule, a small room that serves as an airlock between the frigid outside and the warm interior. You carefully close the outer door before Godwin opens the inner one, preserving the precious heat within. The moment you step inside, the difference in temperature hits you like a physical force. It's not just warm, it's almost hot, especially compared to the knife-edge cold outside. The source of this remarkable warmth dominates the main room, a massive stove structure built of clay, stone, and fired bricks that rises from floor to ceiling along one wall. This isn't the simple open hearth in your home. This is what will later be known as a Russian stove, a sophisticated heating technology that represents the pinnacle of medieval thermal engineering. "Osbert, good to see you," calls Miller from a bench near the stove. His leg is splintered and elevated, the break from the roof collapse clearly serious. "How are you faring?" you ask, moving closer to inspect both his injury and the remarkable stove. "Better than I might have," Miller gestures around the Smith's home. "We'd have frozen for certain if not for Godwin's family." You hand the bundle of dried apples to Miller's wife Agnes, who accepts with a grateful nod. "That stove," you say, unable to hide your admiration. "I've heard of them, but never seen one up close," Godwin laughs. "Best thing I ever built. Uses half the wood of an open hearth and keeps heat for nearly a full day on one good firing. The stove really is a marvel of engineering. Unlike your open hearth, where heat rises directly up and out through a smoke hole, this structure captures heat in its massive walls. The exterior is warm to the touch, deliberately designed to absorb heat from the fire burning inside and then radiate it slowly into the room. Mind if I—" You gesture toward it. "Go ahead, examine all you want," Godwin says proudly. You approach the structure, noting how the fire burns in a chamber at the bottom, but the smoke doesn't rise straight up. Instead, it travels through a complex series of internal channels, a maze that forces hot gases to wind through the entire mass of the stove before finally exiting through a chimney. "The smoke path," Godwin explains, seeing your curiosity, "forces the heat to travel through the whole structure before escaping. By the time smoke reaches the outside, it's surrendered most of its warmth to the stone and clay. I got to see a reconstruction of one of these stoves at a medieval living history museum. The guide told me it took 3 modern engineers to figure out how to recreate the smoke channels correctly. These weren't just random passages. They were precisely calculated to maximize heat transfer while minimizing the risk of backdrafts and smoke build-up. What blows my mind is that these massive heat batteries could maintain a temperature of around 30 under 86 degrees on the sleeping surface for nearly 24 hours after firing, creating a warm microclimate in an otherwise freezing world. Agnes notices you studying the stove. "The sleeping platform on top is the real miracle," she says, gesturing to where several children, a mix of Smiths and Millers, are playing on a wide, flat surface atop the stove. Warm enough to sleep without furs on the coldest nights. This sleeping shelf, you realize, is one of the most coveted spots in any medieval winter home. No wonder it's currently occupied by children. Keeping the youngest family members warm was always the priority. "What's this?" you ask, pointing to what appears to be a small door in the side of the stove structure. "Baking chamber," Godwin's wife explains, emerging from the storage area with a wooden bowl of flour. The heat's gentle enough to bake bread without burning it. That's the genius of these stoves. They weren't just heaters, but multifunctional systems. The same structure that warmed the house also cooked food, baked bread, smoked meat, dried herbs, provided hot water, and created a warm sleeping platform. And this channel under the floor? You notice that the stone floor near the stove has a slight rise running across the room. "Ah, you've spotted my pride," Godwin grins. "Heat channel. The smoke travels under the floor before going up the chimney, warming the stones from below. This floor heating system was essentially a simplified version of the Roman hypocaust, rediscovered and adapted for northern climates. The principle was simple but effective, using waste heat that would otherwise escape to warm the floor, which then radiated that warmth back into the room. Cost me a fortune in clay and stone, Godwin admits, but worth every penny. Haven't had a frozen winter night since we built it." You can't help feeling a twinge of envy. Your open hearth, while adequate, doesn't compare to this marvel of engineering. But then, you're not a blacksmith with access to specialized knowledge and materials. "How's your family?" Miller asks, shifting his splinted leg awkwardly. "Heard you had wall trouble yesterday." "Fixed now," you assure him. "The community helped." Miller nods, his expression a mix of gratitude and shame. "They've been helping us too. More than we deserve after such carelessness with our roof." "What happened exactly?" you ask. though you can already guess. Green wood, Miller admits. Couldn't season it properly before winter set in. Then the weight of the snow. He makes a crashing gesture with his hands. Green wood was a deadly mistake in construction. Unseasoned logs continued to dry and shrink after installation, creating gaps and weakening the entire structure. Anyone with experience knew wood needed at least one full summer of drying before being used in construction. We'll help rebuild come spring, you assure him, though you know that's months away. Until then, the Millers are effectively homeless, dependent on the charity of neighbours. Here, try this. Godwin's wife offers you a wooden cup of something steaming. Birch sap beer with honey. Warms the blood. You accept gratefully. The beverage is sweet and slightly fermented, with a warming effect that spreads from your stomach outward. This wasn't just a luxury. Alcohol provided quick calories and a sensation of warmth that helped combat winter's psychological toll. Medieval people weren't stupid about alcohol, by the way. They understood exactly how it created a false sense of warmth while actually increasing heat loss. That's why winter drinks were carefully formulated to balance alcohol content with actual nutritional value, hence the addition of honey, herbs, and other calorie-rich ingredients. While you drink, you notice Agnes working at a table near the stove, cutting what appears to be turnips into thin slices. Drying them for storage, she explains when she catches your glance. The air near the stove is perfect, warm and dry. Food preservation was another critical winter skill. Every food item had to be processed in specific ways to maximize its shelf life. Root vegetables like turnips could be dried into hard chips that would last for months, then rehydrated in soups and stews when needed. How's your meat supply holding, you ask Miller, knowing that protein was often the scarcest resource in late winter. Lost some in the collapse, he admits, but neighbours brought smoked venison and salt pork, enough to see us through if we're careful. The conversation turns to the coming storm, with Godwin offering weather predictions based on his aching joints, surprisingly accurate forecasting that relied on the body's sensitivity to changing air pressure. Should pass by tomorrow, he concludes, but will drop more snow than we've seen all winter, I wager. As if on cue, the first few flakes begin to fall outside the small window, really just an opening covered with oiled parchment that allows a diffuse light to enter while minimizing heat loss. I should head back before it worsens, you say, rising from the bench. Agnes quickly wraps a small bundle of dried meat. For your children, she insists, pressing it into your hands despite their own precarious situation. This exchange of food, regardless of personal hardship, was the glue that held winter communities together. As you prepare to leave, Godwin pulls you aside. The Millers will need to stay at least another week, he says quietly. The leg is worse than we first thought. Agnes is worried it's not healing straight. You nod understanding. The village will continue to help. I'll speak with the others about bringing more supplies. These moments of community coordination happened constantly throughout winter. Archaeological evidence from medieval villages shows regular patterns of resource sharing during harsh seasons. Food, fuel, and labour distributed to ensure maximum survival rates for the community as a whole. The snow is falling more heavily by the time you exit through the double doors. You pull your hood tight and begin the trek back to your home. The parcels of dried meat tucked securely inside your cloak. Halfway up the hill, you pass the remains of the miller's collapsed dwelling, a painful reminder of how quickly security can turn to disaster in winter. The roof has completely caved in, the weight of snow having overcome the weakened green wood structure. It will have to be entirely rebuilt in spring. The snow begins falling more heavily, thick flakes that catch on your eyelashes and blur your vision. You quicken your pace, recognizing the start of what will likely be a significant storm. When you finally reach your home and push through the door, the relative warmth inside feels like a miracle. Your wife looks up from where she's mending a torn fur with sinew thread, her expression showing relief at your return. Storm's coming faster than expected, you tell her, brushing snow from your cloak. How are they? She asks, setting aside her mending. The father's leg is worse than they thought. They'll need more community support. She nods, already mentally calculating what food can be spared from your own carefully rationed stores. We can send more dried apples tomorrow, and perhaps some of the preserved fish. Your oldest son is working on a wood carving by the fire, not merely an artistic pursuit, but the creation of a new cooking paddle to replace one that broke last week. Nothing is purely decorative in winter. Every activity must produce something of practical value. Your daughter tends the fire, carefully arranging logs to maintain even heat with minimal fuel consumption. This skill, fire management, was taught from earliest childhood, the proper arrangement of wood being as important as having the wood itself. The smith's stove, you tell your wife as you warm your hands by the fire. It's remarkable. Holds heat for nearly a full day on one firing. We could never afford such a thing, she says practically. But perhaps we could improve our hearth come spring. Even simple open hearths could be optimized with proper construction. The height, width, and depth all affected how efficiently wood burned and how heat was distributed. Some hearths included stone or clay extensions that captured and radiated heat long after the fire died down. Outside, the snow falls more heavily, the wind picking up to drive it horizontally past your small window. Inside, your family gathers closer to the central hearth, each occupied with essential tasks: mending, carving, spinning wool, preparing preserved foods for the evening meal. This contrast between the deadly hostility of the winter world outside and the carefully maintained sanctuary within was the defining experience of medieval winter life. Every activity, every decision, every aspect of the shelter's design served one purpose: maintaining this fragile bubble of survivable conditions. As the day progresses, the storm intensifies. Wind howls around the corners of your dwelling, occasionally finding tiny gaps that create haunting whistles or moans. Yet inside, the temperature remains tolerable, thanks to the layers of insulation and the constantly tended fire. We should check the roof again, you tell your son as evening approaches. Ensure yesterday's repairs are holding. Together you climb the short ladder to the sleeping platform, which allows you to reach the underside of the roof where it meets the repaired wall. You run your hands along the junction, feeling for any dampness or drafts. Seems solid, your son confirms after his own inspection. Unlike your cozy bed right now, with its reliable protection from the elements, these medieval shelters required constant monitoring. Even a small leak or draft could quickly escalate into a life-threatening situation. The evening meal is simple but nourishing: porridge enriched with dried berries and a small portion of smoked fish. Food variety decreased as winter progressed, but clever use of preserved herbs and occasional treats of dried fruit helped combat monotony. As darkness falls completely, your wife lights a small oil lamp, rendered animal fat with a wick of twisted plant fibre. It provides minimal light, but enough to continue essential indoor work for another hour before bed. The lamp represents yet another carefully calculated resource trade-off. Its light allows productive work after dark, but the oil it consumes is precious. Each winter evening, households decided whether the value of extended work hours justified the consumption of lighting resources. "Tell us about the Smith's stove again," your daughter requests as the family settles in for the evening. "Is it really warm enough to sleep without furs?" You describe the ingenious structure again, explaining how the smoke path winds through the mass of clay and stone, surrendering its heat before escaping outside. "Someday," your son says with determination, "I'll build one for our home." "Perhaps," you allow, though you know such luxuries might always remain beyond your means. The howling storm outside makes your shelter feel all the more precious. The wind finds every tiny imperfection in your walls, creating small drafts that you mentally note for repair when weather permits. Yet compared to the killing cold beyond your walls, these minor discomforts are trivial. Your children climb to the sleeping platform early, tired from the day's exertions. They arrange themselves in their usual pattern, youngest in the middle for maximum warmth, oldest at the edges where it's slightly cooler. You and your wife remain by the fire, using its light to complete a few final tasks. She sorts through dried herbs, setting aside those needed for tomorrow's meals. You inspect and repair a wooden snow shovel that will be essential once the storm passes. "The Miller family is lucky," your wife says quietly. "If the Smiths hadn't taken them in." The sentence needs no completion. You both know what happens to those without adequate shelter in deepest winter. Archaeological evidence tells the grim tale, remains found frozen in forests, in half-built structures, in inadequate shelters that failed during storms. "We should rotate who brings them supplies," you suggest. "Ensure no single family bears too much burden." She nods agreement. "I'll speak with the other women tomorrow. We'll create a schedule." Even as you talk, you're both aware of how the heat from the fire is becoming less intense as the logs burn down to coals. Soon you'll bank the fire for the night, covering the embers with ash to preserve them until morning, when they'll be carefully coaxed back to life. This nightly ritual of banking the fire was literally a matter of life and death. If the embers died completely, starting a new fire with flint and steel in freezing conditions could be extremely difficult. Some families appointed someone to wake during the night specifically to check that the fire hadn't died. "Time for sleep," your wife finally says, setting aside her work. You add a final log to the fire, position it carefully to burn slowly through the first part of the night, then cover portions of the embers with ash to ensure they'll still be hot come morning. As you climb to the sleeping platform, you feel the accumulated warmth of the day trapped in this highest part of your home. It's not as luxurious as the Smith's stovetop sleeping area, but it's considerably warmer than floor level. Your children are already asleep, their breathing forming small clouds in the cooling air. You and your wife take your places at the edges of the group, another layer of insulation protecting the youngest from the night's deepening cold. Despite the storm's fury outside, there's a profound sense of security in this moment. Your family sheltered in a structure built with generations of accumulated knowledge, surrounded by a community bound together by mutual dependence and shared survival techniques. As you drift towards sleep, you reflect on the day's observations, the sophisticated stove at the Smith's home, the community's response to the Miller family's disaster, the coming storm that you're prepared to weather. Each element represents another facet of the complex survival strategy that enabled human life in these northern regions long before modern technology. The last thing you hear before sleep claims you is the wind's mournful howl, a sound that might inspire dread except for the layers of carefully designed protection that stand between your sleeping family and the winter's deadly embrace. You wake to silence. After falling asleep to the howling storm, the absolute quiet is almost jarring. For a moment you lie still in the pre-dawn darkness, your family's warm bodies pressed against yours on the sleeping platform. The air feels different, colder, but also somehow thicker. You can sense something's changed even before opening your eyes. When you finally sit up, the reason becomes clear. The small window opening is completely dark. Not the darkness of night, but the opacity of being blocked. Your home has been nearly buried in snow. Wake up, you whisper to your wife. The storm. She stirs beside you, immediately alert in the way of people accustomed to winter emergencies. One glance at the window tells her everything she needs to know. "The smoke hole?" she asks, her voice barely audible to avoid waking the children just yet. You shake your head. "I need to check." This is your first priority. If snow has blocked your ventilation, the consequences could be deadly within hours. Carbon monoxide from the banked fire could fill the enclosed space, killing everyone in their sleep. A silent, invisible threat more immediate than even the cold itself. You climb down from the sleeping platform, the packed earth floor cold beneath your feet. The fire has burned to embers overnight, but even this slight combustion produces deadly gases that must have a way to escape. The smoke hole in your roof is a carefully engineered feature, wide enough to allow smoke out but narrow enough to minimize heat loss. Now you stand beneath it, peering upward, and feel a faint movement of air. Not blocked completely then. You exhale in relief. "There's some airflow," you tell your wife, who's now moving quietly around the room, preparing to restart the fire. "But I'll need to clear it from outside." "After the fire catches," she says firmly. Starting the day's fire from preserved embers takes precedence over almost everything else. Without it, there's no warmth, no cooking, no melting snow for water. Your children begin to stir as your wife carefully uncovers the banked embers, adding the smallest, driest splinters of kindling. Her movements are precise, almost ritualistic. This daily rebirth of fire is literally the family's lifeline. I talked with a medieval survival expert who said fire maintenance was the most crucial daily skill. People who failed at properly banking fires overnight or relighting them in the morning often didn't survive winter. It's why fire-starting materials were among the most protected possessions in any household. Within minutes, a small flame takes hold. Only once it's burning steadily does your wife look up. "Now check our situation." You dress in multiple layers: linen undergarments, wool tunic, leather over tunic, and finally your heaviest fur cloak. Each layer serves a specific purpose in the battle against cold, creating trapped air spaces that insulate your body. Medieval winter clothing wasn't just fashion, it was portable shelter. Archaeologists have found winter garments with up to 7 distinct layers, each serving a specific insulation purpose. You wrap additional cloths around your hands and feet, then pull on leather mittens lined with rabbit fur. Your wife hands you a length of rope. "Tie it around your waist," she instructs, the other end to the door frame. This precaution might seem excessive, but people actually died getting lost in snowstorms just steps from their front door. The rope ensures you can find your way back if visibility drops or disorientation sets in. When you open the door, you're confronted with a wall of white. The snow has drifted against the entrance, filling the small vestibule completely. You'll have to dig your way out, Using a wooden shovel kept inside specifically for this purpose, you begin clearing a path. The snow is densely packed and heavy. This will be exhausting work. Your son joins you, silently taking the shovel when your arms need rest. Together, you carve a narrow passage through the snow, eventually breaking through to open air. What you see outside is both beautiful and alarming. The entire village is transformed, with only roof peaks and smoke holes visible across a sea of white. Snow has drifted higher than a tall man's head in some places. Going to be a village effort today, your son observes. He's right. After major storms, the entire community must work together to re-establish pathways, check on vulnerable households, and ensure everyone has survived the night. But your first task is ensuring your own shelter remains functional. You climb carefully onto the snow-covered roof, using a long pole to clear snow from around the smoke hole. Then you check the recent repair work on the north wall, relieved to find it holding firm. From this elevated position, you can see other villagers emerging from their homes, each facing the same challenges. Some are already working together to create a path to the elderly couple living at the east end. They'll be checked first as the most vulnerable members of the community. "Father," your daughter calls from below, "the Smiths are sending someone." You spot a figure trudging laboriously through the deep snow toward your home. Edgar the Tanner, recognizable by his distinctive gait even bundled in winter gear. "Godwin sent me to check on outlying homes," Edgar explains when he reaches you, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Everyone well here?" "All safe," you confirm. "How deep is it near the stream?" "Drifts to the roof of my dugout," Edgar says, "but we're managing. Main concern now is making sure everyone has proper ventilation. 2 homes on the west side blocked smoke holes. Caught it just in time." This wasn't paranoia. Medieval records document entire families found dead in seemingly intact shelters, victims of carbon monoxide poisoning after ventilation blockage. "The meeting house path is being cleared now," Edgar continues. "Everyone's to bring something for a communal meal at midday. Storm could be a blessing in disguise. Good time to take stock and redistribute where needed." These community gatherings after major storms served multiple purposes: checking that everyone had survived, sharing food to ensure no household faced immediate starvation, and collectively planning the next days of recovery work. "We'll be there," you assure him before he continues his rounds to the next hillside dwelling. Your wife emerges from the house wrapped in furs. "How bad?" "Deep drifts," you tell her, "but passable with effort. Village gathering at midday." She nods, immediately calculating what food can be contributed. "We still have dried fish and some preserved berries." Inside, your children are already preparing for the day's extraordinary circumstances. Your daughter melts snow in a clay pot by the fire, fresh water being the first priority. Your son inventories the wood pile, mentally calculating how many days of heat it represents. "We should dig out the storage pit entrance," your wife suggests. "Make sure snow hasn't found a way in." The storage pit, a crucial feature of your home, lies beneath a hatch in the floor, carefully sealed against both cold and rodents. It contains your longest-lasting food reserves: grains, dried fruits, salted meat, and root vegetables in sand. If compromised, your family's survival through late winter would be jeopardized. Together, you and your son clear snow away from the exterior entrance to this underground space, an alternative access point used mainly in summer. As expected, snow has drifted against it, but the heavy wooden door remains secure, showing no signs of moisture penetration. I've seen reconstructed storage pits at archaeological sites. and their engineering marvels. They maintain temperatures just above freezing year-round through carefully designed ventilation and insulation. Some add multiple chambers for different types of food, drier areas for grains, cooler spots for preserved meat. The village will need a water path cleared to the stream, you tell your son as you work. That should be first priority after checking on everyone. He nods understanding. Without access to water, even households with adequate food and fuel would quickly face disaster. By late morning, paths have been established between the main village dwellings. The snow's depth, terrifying at dawn, now forms convenient walls along these pathways, providing unexpected wind protection. Your family prepares to join the community gathering, each carrying something to contribute. Your wife with dried fish wrapped in cloth, your daughter with preserved berries, your son with a bundle of kindling for the meeting house fire, and you with a small pouch of precious salt, worth more than gold in winter preservation. The meeting house stands at the village centre, a structure larger than any individual dwelling, with a massive central hearth designed to accommodate community gatherings. As you approach, smoke rises from its roof, and voices can be heard inside. Nearly every village household is represented when you enter. The Millers are there, the injured father carried by Godwin Smith and another man. The elderly couple from the East End sit closest to the fire, wrapped in extra furs provided by neighbours. Wait, it gets better. These meeting houses weren't just places for random gatherings. Archaeologists have found that they were specifically designed with crisis management in mind. The central hearths could cook food for the entire community at once. Benches were arranged to accommodate the elderly and injured nearest the heat source. 3 hands up for water path clearers, calls the village elder, a man in his 60s who has survived more winters than anyone present. Organisation happens quickly, with tasks assigned based on ability and household situation. Young men without children will clear the main water path. Families with secure homes will check on those in less sturdy dwellings. Those with carpentry skills will assess structural damage across the village. Women with knowledge of healing will examine anyone potentially suffering from cold exposure. This rapid community organisation wasn't accidental. Medieval villages developed sophisticated crisis response systems through brutal trial and error. Archaeological evidence shows that communities with stronger social organisation had significantly higher winter survival rates. The communal meal is simple but heartening, a stew made from contributions from each household, ensuring everyone receives at least one hot meal today, regardless of their home situation. As you eat, discussions focus on immediate concerns. 2 homes with minor roof damage, 1 collapsed outbuilding, several families running low on firewood, and 1 reported case of frostbite that the village midwife is already treating with snow rubs and herbal compresses. The north path should be cleared tomorrow, the elder announces. We'll need access to the forest for more firewood. Godwin Smith speaks up. My household can take in another family if needed. We have the space and heat to spare. Others make similar offers, those with more secure shelters volunteering to share their space with those in precarious situations. This redistribution of living arrangements during crisis was a common winter survival strategy, documented in manor court records and church registries. After the meal, work parties formed to tackle the most urgent tasks. You join the group assessing structural integrity of village dwellings, your experience with yesterday's wall repair making you particularly useful. The snow that seemed so threatening this morning has now become a resource, packed into gaps in damaged walls. used to insulate exposed foundations, even melted for washing wounds. Medieval communities were remarkably adaptive, turning challenges into opportunities whenever possible. By afternoon, you're examining the roof of a home belonging to a young family with 3 small children. Recent snow weight has caused a worrying sag in one section. See how the beam is bending there, you point out to the young father. Not broken yet, but dangerous. Together you devise a temporary support using a salvaged log positioned as a brace beneath the compromised beam. It won't last forever, but it should hold until proper repairs can be made in spring. We would have lost the whole roof by tomorrow, the young father says, visibly relieved. How did you know where to look? You explain the warning signs, the subtle change in roof angle, the small interior cracks near the wall junction. This knowledge, accumulated through generations of winter experience, is as valuable as any physical resource. Medieval buildings weren't designed by architects with formal training. They were the result of accumulated observations about what worked and what failed, each collapse or success adding to a collective wisdom about how to build for survival. When you finally return to your own dwelling late in the afternoon, you find your wife has not been idle. The interior walls have been carefully examined for any new drafts caused by the storm's pressure. She's repacked insulation in several spots where cold air was beginning to penetrate. The Ericssons' young boy has fever, she tells you as you warm yourself by the fire. I've given them some of the dried herbs for tea. Even in crisis, the sharing of resources continues, medicine being among the most commonly exchanged winter items. According to Manor Court records of debt and obligation, your son returns shortly after, having helped clear the main water path to the stream. He's exhausted but pleased with the accomplishment. Water flowing freely, he reports, and we reinforce the sheltered approach so it shouldn't freeze over again soon. Your daughter has spent the afternoon with other young women, checking on the village's food preservation systems, the various pits, hangars, and storage containers that protect winter provisions. She reports that most have survived the storm intact, though 2 families will need help rebuilding collapsed storage shelves. As evening approaches, your family gathers by the fire to share observations and plan the next day's work. This daily council, replicated in households throughout the village, ensures everyone understands current priorities and challenges. The elder thinks we should expect another storm within days, your son says. The birds are behaving strangely. Wildlife behavior was a critical forecasting tool in medieval winters. Unusual bird activity, changes in animal movement patterns, even the behavior of livestock could provide early warning of weather changes. Then we prepare accordingly, you decide. Tomorrow we reinforce the north wall further and gather additional firewood while paths are clear. Your wife nods agreement. I'll visit the western households to organize food inventory. We should know exactly what reserves the village has before the next storm. This constant reassessment and planning characterized medieval winter survival. Nothing was taken for granted. Every resource was carefully tracked and managed. Outside, the temperature drops rapidly as the sun sets. Inside, your family continues working by firelight, mending cold weather clothing, checking preserved food, preparing the next day's kindling, and a dozen other small but essential tasks. The evening meal is deliberately light. Preserving food supplies takes priority over immediate satiation during uncertain times. A thin porridge with small pieces of dried meat provides sustenance without depleting precious reserves. The millers will stay with the smiths until spring, your wife mentions as you eat. Godwin made it official at the gathering. This kind of arrangement, semi-permanent household consolidation during crisis, was common enough that some medieval legal documents specifically addressed the property implications of families joining hearths during winter. After the meal, your son retrieves a small wooden game board from a storage niche. These simple entertainment objects were crucial for maintaining morale during the long, dark winter evenings when outdoor work was impossible. The game, Nineman's Morris, requires strategic thinking and helps pass the hours until sleep. Archaeological excavations have found these game boards in even the most humble medieval dwellings, indicating their importance to winter survival that went beyond mere entertainment. Your family plays by firelight, the familiar patterns of the game providing a sense of normality amid the extraordinary circumstances of the massive storm. Outside, the cleared paths between dwellings allow villagers to visit each other, despite the snow walls rising on either side. Occasional laughter drifts from nearby homes, evidence of the human spirit's resilience even in the most challenging conditions. These social connections were not luxury but necessity, preventing the despair that could lead to giving up the survival fight. As the fire burns down to evening embers, you find yourself reflecting on how the day has transformed from potential disaster to community triumph. The storm that might have killed vulnerable members has instead reinforced village bonds and systems. Your wife catches your thoughtful expression. What is it? Just thinking, you reply. How our ancestors figured all this out. The ventilation, the food storage, the building techniques. How many died learning these lessons? She nods understanding. And how easily they could be forgotten. That's why we teach the children everything, even when it seems obvious. This knowledge transmission, practical skills passed from generation to generation, was perhaps the most essential survival tool of all. Medieval communities had no written building codes or emergency manuals. Everything depended on careful observation and thorough education of the young. As your family prepares for sleep, the routine mirrors the previous night but with heightened attention to safety. The fire is banked with particular care. The ventilation is checked repeatedly. Additional furs are laid out on the sleeping platform in anticipation of even colder temperatures. These weren't just habits, but survival rituals, each step developed and refined through centuries of winter experience. The families that survived were those that performed these rituals most faithfully, leaving nothing to chance. Your children climbed to the sleeping platform first, arranging themselves in their usual pattern. You and your wife remain by the fire a while longer, discussing plans for tomorrow in low voices. We were lucky, she says finally. The repair yesterday held through the storm. Not luck, you correct gently. Preparation. She smiles at that. True enough. Though sometimes I wonder how families survive in the bigger settlements, where they say people barely know their neighbours. This interdependence wasn't just a social preference, but a survival necessity. Historical records show that isolated households had much lower winter survival rates than those integrated into supportive communities. Eventually you join your children on the sleeping platform, your wife following after one final check of the banked fire. The day's exertions ensure sleep comes quickly, despite the unusual circumstances outside. As consciousness fades, your last thoughts are of the village working together, clearing paths, reinforcing structures, sharing resources, protecting the vulnerable. In the harshest season, human connections prove as essential to survival as the physical shelters themselves. Morning comes with clearer skies but bitter cold. The storm has passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape and temperatures that plummet without cloud cover. the kind of cold that makes your nostrils stick together when you breathe and turns exhaled breath into instant crystals. Your family wakes to find frost patterns formed on the interior walls overnight, delicate crystalline structures that mark the exact boundary where warm, moist air from inside meets the freezing surfaces near the exterior. In any other season, they might be considered beautiful. In winter, they're warnings, signs of where heat is escaping too quickly. North wall again, your wife murmurs, running her fingers over the frost patterns. The new packing hasn't fully sealed. This morning's first task is already clear. Before anything else, the wall insulation needs reinforcing. While your wife rekindles the fire from carefully preserved embers, you examine the troublesome section. The moss, clay, and straw mixture packed between logs has shrunk slightly as it froze, creating minute gaps where precious heat escapes. "We need more clay," you tell your son as he joins you, "and it needs to be heated properly this time." Getting true, workable clay in midwinter is no small challenge. The ground is frozen solid, making fresh digging impossible. Fortunately, like most experienced households, you maintain a small store of clay in the storage pit, preserved in a damp state specifically for winter repairs. Your son retrieves a clay ball roughly the size of his head from the storage area. It's been kept wrapped in damp moss and cloth to prevent it from drying out completely. Now it needs warming to become workable. I actually tried this once at a living history museum. They demonstrated how medieval households would warm clay by placing it in wooden containers near the fire, turning it frequently to heat evenly without drying out. The process took hours, but resulted in perfectly workable repair material. While the clay slowly warms, your family addresses other morning priorities. Your daughter prepares a small pot of grain porridge, deliberately small, as food conservation becomes increasingly important as winter progresses. Your wife sorts through her store of dried herbs, selecting those with warming properties to add to the morning meal. The village council is meeting at midday, you remind your family as you eat. After yesterday's storm recovery, today will focus on longer-term planning for the remaining winter months. "Will they be discussing rations?" your son asks, scraping the last bits of porridge from his wooden bowl. You nod. Food inventory was completed yesterday. Now we decide how to distribute what we have. These winter councils weren't just informal gatherings. They represented sophisticated resource management systems developed over centuries. Archaeological and historical records show that medieval communities that survived harsh winters intact had highly organized approaches to rationing and resource sharing. "Father, look," your daughter calls from near the window. "Smoke from the charcoal burn." You move to the small window opening and peer outside. Sure enough, a thin column of smoke rises from the forest edge. The village charcoal burners have managed to restart their operation after the storm. Good news for everyone, as charcoal provides intense heat with minimal smoke, perfect for indoor use during the coldest periods. "We should check on our roof today too," your wife suggests, after yesterday's weight of snow. The roof of a medieval dwelling was its most vulnerable point, the barrier between life-sustaining warmth and the killing cold above. Even small compromises in its integrity could lead to disaster. You nod agreement. "I'll examine it from outside. You check from within." While the clay continues warming, you bundle up to venture outdoors. The world beyond your door has been transformed by the storm. Snow stands waist-high in places, with paths cut through it like canyons between dwellings. The morning sun creates a blinding glare off the white landscape. You circle your dwelling, studying the roof carefully. Its steep pitch has allowed most snow to slide off, but some remains along the edges and in the valleys where roof sections meet. This snow actually serves as additional insulation when maintained at the proper thickness. Yet another example of how medieval builders turned potential problems into advantages. The roof structure itself is a marvel of engineering disguised as simple construction. From the outside it appears to be just thatch, straw, or in some cases wooden shingles. But climb into the rafters and you'd find a sophisticated multi-layered system. Wait, I need to explain this bit. This blew my mind when I researched it. Medieval roofs weren't just slapped together. They had a primary waterproof layer, often birch bark in northern regions, covered by insulating layers of moss or hay, then topped with the visible outer covering. The entire system could be 1/2 meter thick. You check the junction where roof meets the problematic north wall, looking for any signs of separation or damage. Finding none visible from outside, you return indoors to warm your nearly frozen fingers and report. Roof structure seems sound, you tell your wife, who's been examining ceiling beams from inside. No visible gaps or settling. She nods. Beams show no new stress cracks. We were fortunate. The clay is warmed enough to become workable, so your son begins mixing it with fresh moss and straw chopped into short fibres. This mixture, developed over generations, creates an insulating compound that expands slightly as it dries, ensuring gaps remain sealed even with the natural contraction of timber in cold weather. I'll start the repair, you tell your wife. You should represent us at the council. She considers this, then nods agreement. In many medieval households, responsibilities weren't rigidly divided by gender during winter crisis. Whoever had the most appropriate skills handled each task, regardless of traditional roles. As your wife prepares to leave for the council meeting, wrapping herself in multiple layers of protection against the intense cold, a knock sounds at the door. Your son opens it to find a village youth stamping his feet against the cold. Message from Elder Thomas, the boy says through chattering teeth. All households to bring their remaining preserved fruit to council. Counting and redistribution today. This pooling of certain food resources, particularly those rich in vitamins like preserved fruits and berries, was a critical survival strategy. Historical records show that villages which implemented midwinter redistribution of vitamin-rich foods had lower rates of scurvy and other deficiency diseases. Your wife quickly gathers your household's modest store of dried apples, cherries, and berries, wrapping them carefully in clean cloth before placing them in a carrying basket. We should get a fair share back, she tells you quietly. Maybe more if any households have excess. The village's redistribution system wasn't perfect equality. It recognized differences in household size, age of occupants, and special needs like pregnancy or illness. But it ensured that no one starved while others had surplus. As your wife departs with your daughter, who'll help carry supplies from other homes, you and your son begin the careful process of repairing the wall insulation. First, you scrape out the old, compromised material, saving any bits still usable to mix with the new. Then you carefully pack the fresh clay mixture into the gaps between logs, using wooden tools to press it firmly into every crevice. Remember, you instruct your son, pack from both sides toward the middle. That way air pockets don't form. These techniques weren't random. They represented sophisticated understanding of how insulation functions and how different materials interact. Modern testing of recreated medieval insulation compounds shows they were remarkably effective. The work is slow and meticulous, with each section of wall receiving careful attention. Your fingers grow stiff with cold despite working indoors, as you must leave the door open periodically to see clearly in the weak winter light. Midway through the repairs, another visitor arrives. Gunther, the carpenter who helped with your roof earlier. Elder Thomas sent me to check structures after the storm, he explains, stamping snow from his boots at your threshold. Any damage beyond what we saw yesterday? You show him the wall you're repairing, explaining the frost patterns that alerted you to the problem. Gunther nods approvingly at your repair technique. Good mixture. Adding egg whites? Haven't any to spare, you admit. Eggs were precious winter commodities, chickens rarely laying during the coldest months. Take this, Gunther offers a small pouch from inside his cloak. Blood from the butchering yesterday. Mix a small amount with your compound. Helps it set stronger in cold. This addition of protein, usually blood or egg whites, to clay compounds was a sophisticated technological adaptation. The proteins created stronger molecular bonds in the mixture, improving durability in extreme conditions. You accept gratefully, adding a small amount of the dried blood to your remaining repair material. The darkened mixture looks odd but will perform better. Another example of medieval builders using every available resource to improve survival chances. While you continue repairs, Gunther examines your roof supports from inside, tapping beams with an experienced hand and listening carefully to the resulting sounds. Solid construction, he pronounces finally, should hold through spring thaw. His visit illustrates another aspect of medieval winter survival, the sharing of specialized knowledge. Those with particular expertise would check multiple dwellings, identifying problems that less experienced householders might miss. As Gunther prepares to leave for his next inspection, he pauses. Council's discussing ice harvest. Lakes frozen thick enough now. Probably start tomorrow. This news is significant. Ice harvesting was a community undertaking that provided critical food preservation resources for late winter and early spring. Blocks of ice stored in straw-lined pits could remain frozen for months, allowing perishable foods to be preserved when salt was scarce. We'll send hands, you assure him. Every household was expected to contribute labour to community projects like ice harvesting. After Gunther departs, you and your son complete the wall repairs, carefully smoothing the surface of the new insulation to match the surrounding wall. It will take days to dry completely, but should begin functioning immediately. Your son builds up the fire to help the new mixture cure faster. The increased heat makes the single-room dwelling almost comfortable for the first time in days. I'm going to check our roof from above, your son suggests, restless now that the repair work is complete. You agree, watching through the window as he climbs carefully onto the snow-covered roof. Medieval youth learned structure maintenance from early childhood, each generation passing practical knowledge to the next. While he works, you take inventory of your firewood supply. After the storm and repair work, your carefully stacked wood has been depleted faster than planned. You make mental calculations about consumption rates and remaining winter days. Medieval households tracked resource usage with sophisticated methods, despite lacking formal mathematics. Notched sticks, pebble counters, and other memory aids helped plan consumption rates to ensure supplies lasted through winter. Your son returns with frost-reddened cheeks, but good news. Roof is solid. Cleared snow from valleys and check the smoke hole surround. No signs of weakness. This maintenance prevented future emergencies, a constant theme in medieval winter survival. Addressing small issues immediately prevented catastrophic failures later. By midday, your wife and daughter return from the village council, their basket now containing a carefully measured portion of dried fruits, roughly equal to what they contributed, but with more variety. The redistribution ensures everyone gets different types of preserved foods, your wife explains, better for preventing winter sickness. This intuitive understanding of nutritional diversity predated scientific knowledge of vitamins by centuries. Medieval communities recognized that varied diets prevented certain winter ailments, even without understanding the biochemical reasons. What else from council, you ask, helping unpack their basket? Ice harvest tomorrow as expected, your wife reports. Our household to send 2 people, and there's a pig butchering at the Westfield farm 3 days from now. Every household gets a share based on size. These community food events were carefully timed throughout winter to ensure regular protein access without depleting preserved supplies too quickly. Manor records show scheduled butchering was spaced to provide fresh meat approximately every 2 weeks in well-managed communities. Your daughter adds more news. The charcoal burners need help clearing their path, in exchange for extra charcoal for participating households. This informal barter system, labour exchange for resources, supplemented the more formal redistribution managed by village elders. Both systems together ensured community survival through resource sharing. The afternoon brings another visitor, old Agnes, the village's most experienced midwife and healer. She arrives with a small clay pot of salve. For hands, she explains, offering the greenish mixture. Working in cold ruins the skin. This helps heal cracks. The salve, made from rendered animal fat mixed with pine resin and medicinal herbs, has a strong but not unpleasant smell. These healing compounds were another critical winter resource, preventing small injuries from developing into dangerous infections. Agnes stays for a cup of hot herbal water, exchanging news about various households she's visited. This information sharing wasn't mere gossip but vital community monitoring, tracking who might need additional help or resources. The miller boy has cough, she reports, watching to ensure it doesn't worsen. The smith's stove is keeping them warm enough for proper healing, thankfully. As afternoon fades toward evening, your family engages in typical winter indoor work. Your wife and daughter spin wool into thread, a critical activity that produced material for new clothing and repairs. You and your son craft wooden handles for tools that will be needed in spring. Every moment in daylight hours was productive in medieval winter households. Even children's games often had practical aspects, developing skills needed for survival. The evening meal is another carefully measured portion of preserved foods, turnips reconstituted in broth, a small amount of salted fish, and bread made from the last of the previous autumn's flour. As darkness falls completely outside, your family gathers closer to the fire. Winter evenings were for storytelling, planning, and passing knowledge. Tonight, given the ice harvest tomorrow, you review the process with your children. Remember, the ice has to be cut in blocks of similar size, you explain. Too large and they can't be moved. Too small and they melt too quickly in storage. Your wife adds practical advice. Wear double mittens, but be prepared to get wet anyway. Bring spare hand coverings. This verbal instruction, specific, detailed, practical, was how crucial survival knowledge passed through generations. Medieval people may not have had formal education, but they had highly developed systems for preserving and transmitting life-saving information. The evening continues with your wife describing a technique for extending flour supplies by adding ground acorns, knowledge shared at the council meeting. Your son demonstrates a new method for securing roof thatch he learned from Gunther. Your daughter practices finger exercises for maintaining dexterity when working in cold. Each person contributes knowledge, each learns from others. This continuous education process was embedded in daily life, ensuring critical skills weren't lost. As bedtime approaches, your family performs the now familiar rituals of preparing for night in deep winter. The fire is carefully banked to maintain embers until morning. Additional covers are arranged on the sleeping platform. A small container of water is placed near enough to the fire to prevent freezing overnight. One by one, your family climbs to the sleeping platform, arranging themselves in their usual pattern for maximum warmth conservation. As you settle in beside them, you reflect on the day's accomplishments. Wall repaired, roof checked, resources managed, knowledge shared. Each small action contributing to the complex system of survival that has allowed humans to thrive even in the most hostile environments. Outside, the temperature continues dropping under clear skies. Inside, your family's breath forms small clouds in the cooling air. But beneath the layers of furs and woven blankets, body heat creates a microclimate of survivable warmth. Another example of how medieval people engineered solutions with available resources. Your last thoughts before sleep overtakes you are of tomorrow's ice harvest, the community working together to secure resources for the challenging months still ahead. In the rhythm of medieval winter, each day builds upon the last, each challenge met through collective wisdom and shared effort. Dawn breaks with a bone-deep cold that makes the previous days seem almost mild by comparison. The temperature has plummeted overnight, turning the world brittle. When you step outside to check conditions, the snow squeaks beneath your boots, a sound only heard in the most severe cold, when snow crystals become so frozen they crunch rather than compact. Ice harvest weather, your son says behind you, his breath creating a dense cloud that hangs in the still air. He's right. The extreme cold is brutal for human comfort, but perfect for harvesting ice. At these temperatures, cut blocks will freeze more solidly, last longer in storage, and be less prone to breaking during transport. Your family prepares for the day with practiced efficiency. The morning meal is hearty by winter standards. You'll need the energy for the hard work ahead. Porridge thickened with dried berries and a precious sliver of preserved fat rendered from last autumn's pig slaughter. Layer your clothes properly, your wife reminds everyone as they dress. Wet work means wet clothing. Ice harvesting was among the most physically challenging winter activities, combining intense labor with the constant threat of soaking in freezing temperatures. Improperly managed, it could lead to hypothermia and death within hours. The preparation rituals reflect this danger. Your family dresses in multiple layers, linen undergarments to wick moisture away from skin, wool middle layers for insulation even when damp, and outer coverings treated with fat or oil for water resistance. Extra mittens, head coverings, and foot wraps are carefully packed. Getting soaked during ice harvesting isn't just uncomfortable, it's potentially deadly if you can't dry out quickly. Remember, you tell your children as you prepare to leave, if your hands or feet stop hurting and go numb, that's when you're in real danger. Pain means you're still safe. This counterintuitive knowledge that pain is a positive sign in extreme cold was critical survival information. Numbness signals the beginning of frostbite, when tissue damage becomes likely. Your family sets out toward the lake, joining streams of villagers converging from different directions. Despite the brutal cold, there's an almost festive atmosphere. Ice harvesting, while dangerous and difficult, also represented community solidarity and the promise of preserved food in late winter and early spring. I talked with a Finnish historian who specializes in traditional ice harvesting. She told me these community events were surprisingly well documented in church records because they often coincided with minor religious celebrations, practical survival and spiritual practices intertwined. The frozen lake comes into view as you crest a small rise. Already dozens of villagers are preparing tools and clearing snow from the ice surface. Near the shore, several temporary structures have been erected specifically for today's work. Go help with the warming huts, you direct your son and daughter, pointing toward frames being covered with hides and canvas. These simple shelters, not meant for overnight use, will provide critical protection for workers to warm themselves periodically throughout the day. Your wife joins the group organizing tools, long saws with specialized teeth for cutting ice, metal-tipped poles for guiding floating blocks, and wooden tongs for lifting. The tools represent significant community investment, many crafted by Godwin Smith and maintained carefully from year to year. You approach Elder Thomas, who's overseeing the operation. Though not the youngest or strongest man present, his experience with ice harvesting makes him the natural leader today. We're marking the cutting grid now, he tells you, pointing to men using axes to score lines across the cleared ice. Need someone to test thickness. Interested. Testing ice thickness was both crucial and hazardous. The person doing it faced the greatest risk of breakthrough. But someone has to ensure the ice can support the weight of workers and harvested blocks. I'll do it, you agree, accepting the specialized testing spud, a metal-tipped pole designed to punch through ice to measure its depth. Old Agnes appears at your side with a length of rope. Tie this around your waist, she instructs. 2 strong men will hold the other end. This safety practice reflected generations of hard-won knowledge. Historical records document drowning deaths during ice harvesting across medieval Europe, leading to the development of sophisticated rescue techniques. You move cautiously onto the lake, stopping every few paces to drive the testing spud into the ice. The first few blows barely crack the surface, a good sign indicating thick ice. As you move farther from shore, you continue testing, finding consistent thickness of nearly a foot, more than adequate for safe harvesting. Looks good, you call back, receiving acknowledging waves from those watching anxiously. With safety confirmed, the work begins in earnest. The village's strongest men operate the long ice saws, cutting along the scored grid lines to create blocks roughly 2 feet square. Others use poles to guide the freshly cut blocks toward the extraction point near shore. The ice is so clear this year, remarks a woman working beside you as you help guide blocks toward shore. Sign of clean water and proper freezing conditions. She's right. The ice is frozen with unusual clarity, free of the cloudy layers that form when freezing happens unevenly. Medieval communities observed these natural indicators closely, recognizing how they reflected conditions that might affect food preservation quality. Near shore, a team including your son creates a channel from the cutting area to the extraction point, a sloped area where blocks can be dragged from water onto land. The physics of this operation was precisely understood. Too steep an angle would cause blocks to shatter, too shallow would make extraction exhaustingly difficult. Your daughter works with a group managing the warming huts, keeping small fires burning and ensuring no one stays in the bitter cold too long. These rotation systems weren't just kindness, but survival strategy, keeping workers cycling between intense activity and warming breaks prevented dangerous cold exposure. The warming huts themselves are masterpieces of efficient temporary construction. Unlike your permanent winter dwelling, these structures prioritize quick assembly and maximum heat concentration over longevity. Each hut consists of a simple wooden frame covered with hides, canvas, or woven mats, with a small opening that can be closed with a flap. Inside, a small fire burns in a shallow pit surrounded by stones. The entire structure is designed to heat quickly and hold just enough warmth for short recovery periods. I visited a historical recreation where they built these exact shelters. What impressed me most was how they used reflected heat, positioning hides and reflective materials to bounce warmth back toward the center, creating a heated zone far warmer than you'd expect from such a small fire. By midday, a substantial number of ice blocks have been extracted and arranged in rows for transport. The community works with practiced coordination, each person knowing their role in this complex operation that must be completed in a single day before darkness brings additional danger. During a warming break, you watch as several men construct sledges for transporting ice blocks. These aren't permanent vehicles, but temporary structures built specifically for moving heavy loads across snow. Made from wooden runners with cross pieces lashed between them, they'll be pulled by teams of villagers rather than precious livestock. Time to begin transport, Elder Thomas announces as the winter sun reaches its meagre peak. The community reorganizes, with stronger individuals continuing the cutting operation, while others form teams to drag loaded sledges back to the village. Your family splits up, your son staying with the cutting crew, you and your wife joining different transport teams, and your daughter continuing with the warming hut management. The first loaded sledge begins its journey, 6 people pulling in coordinated effort, while 2 guide from behind. Each sledge carries about 20 ice blocks, a substantial weight that requires careful management on the packed snow path. Your team takes the second sledge, and you quickly discover the brutal difficulty of this task. The runners catch and stick on uneven snow surfaces. The weight seems to multiply with each step. Within minutes, your back and shoulders burn with effort despite the freezing air. But the team finds rhythm, using short commands to coordinate pulls over difficult spots. This wasn't random struggling, but a sophisticated system developed over generations to move heavy loads with human power alone. "Hold," calls the guide behind when the runners stick in a drift. "Rocket free, then all together." The team responds with practiced moves, gently rocking the sledge side to side to break suction with the snow, then pulling in perfect unison once it's loosened. These techniques represent collective knowledge accumulated through centuries of winter work. When your team reaches the village, you're directed to the communal ice storage pit, a structure that looks like a small hill, but is actually a carefully designed preservation system. Dug into the ground before winter and lined with straw, the pit is now ready to receive its precious frozen cargo. The ice blocks are carefully arranged within the pit, each layer separated by more straw for insulation. This wasn't just random packing, but a precise science. The blocks had to touch just enough to form a cold mass, but be sufficiently insulated to prevent melting when spring arrived. Once your sledge is emptied, your team returns to the lake for another load. The journey is slightly easier with the path now more firmly packed by previous trips, but still grueling work. By your third return trip, you notice specialized techniques emerging among different transport teams. Some have developed a step counting rhythm to maintain pace. Others use sing-song chants to coordinate effort, each team adapting to find the most efficient approach for their specific members. These micro-innovations, small adjustments to techniques based on immediate circumstances, characterized medieval problem-solving. Without formal engineering, people relied on practical experimentation and rapid adoption of improvements. Late afternoon brings changing weather, clouds gathering on the horizon suggesting another storm approaching. "We need to finish before dark," Elder Thomas announces. "Last cutting now, then everyone to transport." The community responds with increased urgency, understanding the danger of being caught near the lake if visibility drops or temperatures plummet further with nightfall. Your son joins your transport team for the final runs, his young strength welcome as fatigue sets in among older members. Together you make 2 more grueling journeys between lake and village. The entrance to the ice storage pit has been carefully designed with the same principles as your home's doorway, a staged access that prevents warm air from rushing in. A small vestibule with inner and outer coverings creates an airlock effect. Even in simple structures, medieval builders applied sophisticated environmental control techniques. "That should be enough," Elder Thomas finally declares as the last sledge is unloaded. "Seal the pit." The storage pit is closed with layers of insulating materials, straw, earth, and snow packed in specific patterns. When properly constructed, these pits could maintain ice for months, sometimes even into late summer. With work complete, the community begins the weary journey home in deepening twilight. Despite exhaustion, there's satisfaction in collective accomplishment. The harvested ice represents security, the ability to preserve spring game, milk, and other perishables beyond their natural season. Your family trudges homeward together, muscles aching from the day's labor. The approaching storm brings wind that cuts through even the thickest clothing, reminding everyone why proper shelter means survival. Reaching home has never felt so welcome. Your dwelling's double-door entrance, criticized by some as unnecessarily complex when you built it, now proves its worth. The small vestibule between outer and inner doors allows family members to shed snow and ice without letting precious heat escape from the main room. "This doorway design," your son comments as you all crowd into the small space, stamping feet and brushing snow from clothing, "saved more wood than it took to build." He's right. The vestibule's function as an airlock means your home loses significantly less heat when people enter and exit, a critical efficiency during winter when every stick of firewood counts. The entrance design was among the most important yet least appreciated aspects of medieval winter dwellings. Archaeological evidence shows that northern communities developed increasingly sophisticated entrance systems over generations, each refinement improving heat retention. Once through the inner door, the relative warmth of your home feels like a miracle after hours in bitter cold. Though the temperature inside is still cold by modern standards, probably only a few degrees above freezing, it represents the difference between survival and death. Your daughter, who returned earlier, has maintained the fire and prepared a simple hot meal, reconstituted dried vegetables and grain in broth with precious herbs for flavor and medicinal value. The family gathers around the central hearth, warming hands and faces before eating. These moments of transition from deadly cold to survivable warmth were daily experiences that shaped medieval winter psychology. "Everyone unharmed?" your wife asks, examining each family member's extremities for signs of frostbite or damage. This check wasn't mere motherly concern, but critical medical practice. Early identification of cold damage could mean the difference between minor discomfort and loss of fingers, toes, or worse. After confirming everyone has escaped injury, your family settles into evening routine. Wet outer garments are hung carefully near, but not too near, the fire to dry without burning. Boots are stuffed with dry straw to absorb moisture and maintain their shape for tomorrow. The ice should last well into summer with proper management, tell your children as you eat. Enough for the whole village to preserve meat and milk when they become available again. This food security represented more than physical survival. Historical records show that communities with effective food preservation systems had greater social stability, lower rates of conflict, and better health outcomes than those living meal to meal. Outside, wind begins to howl as the predicted storm arrives. Inside, your family responds with practiced moves, checking the newly repaired wall insulation, adjusting the smoke hole cover to prevent snow entry while maintaining ventilation, placing extra water containers near the fire to prevent freezing overnight. "Sounds like another big one," your son observes as wind moans around the dwelling's corners. "Good day to finish it," your wife agrees, referring to the completed ice harvest. "Tomorrow will be storm clearing again." This constant adaptation to changing conditions defined medieval winter life. Each day brought new challenges requiring immediate response, with little room for delay or error. The evening passes with quiet indoor activities, tool maintenance, clothing repair, and planning discussions for coming days. The imminent storm means tomorrow will likely focus on path clearing and structural maintenance again rather than resource gathering. "The miller boy's cough is better," your wife mentions as she mends a torn mitten. She learned this at the ice harvest, where information exchange was as valuable as the ice itself. Old Agnes thinks the warming herbs worked. These casual updates on community members' well-being weren't just conversation, but vital monitoring systems. Medieval villages functioned as single organisms in winter, each household connected to others' welfare. As night deepens, your family prepares for sleep. Extra furs are arranged on the sleeping platform in anticipation of dropping temperatures. The fire is carefully banked to maintain heat through the night, while minimizing the risk of sparks. Your children climb to the sleeping platform first, their bodies exhausted from the day's labor. You and your wife remain by the fire a while longer, discussing household management in quiet voices. "The north wall repair is holding well," you observe. "No frost patterns today." "The clay blood mixture seems stronger," she agrees. "We should remember that technique." This ongoing evaluation and refinement of methods, noting what works, what doesn't, what could be improved, was the foundation of medieval technological development. Without formal science, observation and experience drove innovation. The wind outside grows stronger, occasionally gusting with such force that the dwelling seems to inhale and exhale, contracting slightly under pressure, then expanding again. But the structure holds firm, its deliberate flexibility part of its survival design. Eventually you join your children on the sleeping platform, your wife following after one final check of the banked fire. The physical exhaustion from ice harvesting ensures sleep comes quickly, despite the storm's increasing fury outside. As consciousness fades, your last thoughts are of the community working together at the frozen lake, dozens of people coordinating complex tasks in killing cold to secure resources for all. In the harshest season, these bonds of shared labor and knowledge create security that no individual could achieve alone. Outside, the storm envelops your dwelling in swirling snow and howling wind. Inside, your family sleeps in hard-won warmth, protected by generations of accumulated wisdom encoded in the very structure around you. You wake to absolute stillness. The howling wind that lulled you to sleep has vanished, replaced by a silence so complete it seems to press against your ears. This sudden quiet after a storm usually means one thing: the temperature has plummeted to dangerous levels. Before even opening your eyes, you're aware of the biting cold that seeped into the dwelling overnight. Your breath forms a small cloud above you, hanging visibly in the dim pre-dawn light filtering through the frost-covered window covering. "Fire's nearly out," your wife whispers beside you, already awake and assessing the situation. This is the moment winter survivors dread, waking to find the carefully banked fire has burned lower than expected. The dwelling's interior temperature has dropped dangerously, and rekindling flames quickly becomes the difference between life and death. You slip from beneath the furs, your body protesting as it leaves the relative warmth of the sleeping platform. The packed earth floor feels like ice against your feet as you move to the central hearth. The previous night's embers glow faintly under their protective layer of ash, still alive but barely. You kneel before them, your movements deliberate and precise. This is no time for haste or error. "Hand me the kindling box," you tell your son, who's now awake and watching with concerned eyes. The box contains your most precious fire-starting materials: perfectly dried wood shavings, birch bark strips, and the smallest splinters of resinous pine, all painstakingly collected and prepared during warmer months precisely for moments like this. Historians at Cambridge actually studied medieval fire-starting techniques by recreating them in period-accurate conditions. They found that successful households maintained at least 3 separate fire-starting kits with increasingly precious materials, saved for emergencies of escalating severity. You carefully arrange the finest kindling over the struggling embers, then lean down to blow gently. Your breath, directed with practiced precision, delivers oxygen exactly where needed without dispersing the ash covering. The kindling catches with a small, encouraging flicker. You resist the urge to add larger pieces immediately, a common mistake that could smother these fragile beginnings. Instead, you continue adding the smallest materials, building the fire's strength methodically. Your family watches in tense silence. They understand that this isn't just making breakfast comfortable, it's re-establishing the barrier between life and freezing death. Only when the flames grow steadier do you carefully add slightly larger sticks, arranged in a careful pattern that maximizes airflow while protecting the nascent fire. "It's catching properly," your wife observes with audible relief as the flames strengthen. The immediate crisis averted, your attention turns to assessing the dwelling after the night's storm. Your daughter moves to the small window opening and scrapes away frost to peer outside. "Snow past the top of the door," she reports. "We're buried again." Being snowed in wasn't uncommon during severe northern winters. Medieval communities developed sophisticated techniques for managing these situations, from maintaining emergency roof exits to creating standardized pathway clearing rotations. "Check the smoke hole first," you instruct your son. The ventilation remains your most critical concern, ensuring deadly carbon monoxide can escape while precious heat remains trapped inside. He climbs to examine the ceiling opening, confirming Still clear, some snow around the edges, but the passage is open. With immediate survival concerns addressed, your family begins the day's routine with heightened attention to conserving warmth. Every movement is calculated to maintain body heat, while accomplishing necessary tasks. Your wife prepares a hot breakfast, porridge made with the last of your preserved milk, carefully rationed honey, and dried berries. The meal is designed to provide maximum internal warmth and energy for the challenging day ahead. "I need to check the food storage today," she tells you between spoonfuls. "With these temperature drops, we should verify nothing's freezing that shouldn't." Underground storage spaces were sophisticated microclimate management systems. Different foods required different conditions. Some needed to remain unfrozen, others benefited from freezing, and some required specific humidity levels. After eating, your family addresses the snow situation. Using the interior entrance to your storage cellar, you're able to access the underground space that connects to a separate exterior entrance, a design feature specifically included for situations exactly like this. "I'll dig out from the cellar exit," you tell your family. Easier than trying to move all the snow at the main door. This is the type of ingenuity that medieval architects built into their homes in northern regions, redundant entry and exit points that ensured no single snowdrift could trap occupants. The cellar itself deserves more explanation. This wasn't just a simple hole in the ground, but a carefully engineered space with multiple chambers. Archaeological excavations have revealed these sophisticated underground rooms with different temperature and humidity zones for various storage needs. You descend through the interior hatch into the cool darkness below. The temperature here remains remarkably stable, cool enough to preserve food but protected from the killing freeze outside. The walls are lined with straw-filled niches containing winter vegetables, preserved meats, and sealed containers of grain. This underground space maintains a temperature of about 4 Briens, 39, regardless of exterior conditions, cold enough to preserve food, but warm enough to prevent freezing of root vegetables and certain liquids. The physics of Earth's natural insulation was perfectly understood by medieval builders. Moving to the exterior entrance, a reinforced doorway currently blocked by snow, you begin the laborious process of digging outward. The snow has solidified into a dense mass that must be broken apart before it can be moved. What's wild is that archaeologists found specialized snow-clearing tools in medieval sites, wooden shovels with metal-reinforced edges, icebreakers with specific designs for different snow conditions, and even primitive snowshoes for moving atop deep drifts. After nearly an hour of exhausting work, you break through to open air. The world outside is transformed. Snowdrifts taller than a man, creating an alien landscape of white mounds and shadowed valleys where buildings and paths once stood. More shocking than the snow is the cold. The temperature has dropped to levels rarely experienced, the kind of cold that freezes exposed skin within minutes and makes breathing painful as it sears lung tissue. "Father," your son calls from the cellar below, "did you break through?" "Yes," you call back, "but tell everyone to dress in their absolute warmest before coming up. It's dangerously cold." This wasn't exaggeration. Historical records document periods of extreme cold during medieval winters that modern people rarely experience. Chronicles describe birds freezing mid-flight and falling from the sky, trees exploding as sap expanded when freezing, and unwary travellers found frozen solid on paths. When your family eventually joins you outside, everyone is wrapped in multiple layers: linen undergarments to wick moisture, wool middle layers for insulation, and outer garments of leather or fur. Faces are covered except for narrow slits for eyes, as exposed facial skin could freeze within minutes. The village is eerily silent, though smoke rises from most chimneys, reassuring signs that other families have survived the night. No one is visible outdoors yet, suggesting everyone is facing the same challenges with snow and extreme cold. "We need to check on the elderly couple first," your wife says, referencing the oldest village residents who live alone. The extreme cold creates new walking challenges. Snow that would normally yield underfoot has frozen into an unyielding, slippery surface, requiring careful movement to avoid falls. Your family forms a chain, holding on to each other as you navigate toward the elderly couple's dwelling. Their home shows no smoke rising, an immediate cause for concern. Your son runs ahead, banging on their door with urgent force. No response comes from inside. "We need to get in now," you decide, moving to help your son force the outer door. The entrance gives way with surprising ease, suggesting it wasn't properly secured, another worrying sign. Inside the vestibule, frost covers everything. The inner door is stiff with ice when you push it open. The scene inside explains everything. The fire has gone completely out. The elderly couple are still on their sleeping platform, huddled together under furs but visibly shivering. "The wood got wet," the old man manages through chattering teeth. "Couldn't keep the fire going." This was a catastrophic situation that would quickly become fatal without intervention. Your family springs into action with practiced urgency. Your son immediately begins gathering the couple's remaining dry kindling. Your daughter helps the elderly woman sit up, wrapping her in additional furs. Your wife removes her own outer cloak to add warmth to the couple, while you focus on getting fire started from scratch. Unlike your home, where embers remain to build upon, here you must create fire using flint and steel, a challenging task in the best conditions, nearly impossible in such cold. Your hands, already stiff from outdoor exposure, struggle to strike the precise sparks needed. After several failed attempts, your son suggests, "We should bring them to our home. It's already warm." He's right. Getting the couple to an already heated dwelling would be faster than re-establishing fire in their frozen home. Together you wrap them in layers of furs and prepare to transport them through the dangerous cold. I actually learned about this from court records describing medieval winter emergencies. There are documented cases where entire households were temporarily relocated to neighbours' homes during extreme cold, with formal agreements about resource sharing and labour exchange to compensate the hosting family. "I'll go ahead and ensure our fire is built up," your daughter offers, racing back toward your home to prepare for the additional occupants. Moving the elderly couple requires careful coordination. Though not heavily built, their stiffened limbs and weakened condition make transport challenging through deep snow and freezing temperatures. Your son and wife each take one arm of the old woman, while you manage the old man, who struggles to help but lacks strength. The journey of barely 100 paces becomes an expedition, taking nearly half an hour through the difficult conditions. When you finally reach your home, your daughter has prepared well. The fire roars with life, and she's arranged sitting places close to the hearth. The temperature difference between outside and your dwelling is stark, perhaps 40°, 72°, warmer inside than the killing cold beyond your walls. "Get them by the fire, but not too close," your wife instructs, knowing that warming too quickly can be dangerous for severely chilled bodies. The next hours are devoted to gradually warming the elderly couple. Your wife prepares hot broth, administered in small sips to warm from within. Your daughter gently chafes their hands and feet, carefully watching for the dangerous white patches of frostbite. Meanwhile, you and your son return to the couple's dwelling to secure it and recover essential items they'll need. You also restart their fire, knowing that maintaining minimum warmth will prevent further structural damage from freezing. This kind of community care wasn't just kindness, but mutual survival strategy. Historical records show formalized systems in many medieval villages for checking on vulnerable residents during extreme weather, with specific households assigned responsibility for others. By midday, with the elderly couple stabilized in your home, you venture out to check broader village conditions. The extreme cold continues, but pathways are beginning to appear between dwellings as households dig out from the storm. Near the village centre, you encounter others with the same purpose, assessing damage, checking on neighbours, determining immediate needs. Information exchanges happen rapidly. The north path is completely blocked. 2 collapsed outbuildings near the stream. The millers need more firewood. Theirs got wet in their temporary shelter. What fascinates me about medieval crisis response is how quickly and effectively information spread without modern communication. Villagers developed sophisticated systems for status reporting and resource coordination that operated largely through visual signals and in-person networks. As the village assessment continues, a new concern emerges. 3 young men who left yesterday to check trap lines haven't returned. With the extreme cold, this absence has become life-threatening. They would have built a temporary shelter when the storm hit, suggests an experienced hunter. But in this cold, those aren't meant for overnight. Temporary shelters, quickly constructed emergency refuges in the forest, were standard practice for anyone travelling away from permanent dwellings. But they were designed for short-term protection, not the extreme conditions currently facing the region. A search party begins forming immediately. You join the group, knowing that many searchers increase the chances of finding the missing men alive. Before departing, you return home to inform your family and gather essential supplies. Your wife immediately prepares a small bundle of fire-starting materials and dried food. Your son insists on joining the search despite your concerns. I know their usual trapping routes, he argues, and more eyes mean better chances. He's right, and though barely 16, he's been taught survival skills throughout his life. You agree, and together you rejoin the forming search party. The group consists of 8 men from various households, each carrying emergency supplies, fire starters, food, extra furs, and simple medical materials for frostbite or injuries. The organization happens without formal leadership, each person naturally taking responsibility for what they know best. One man brings a crude map scratched onto birch bark showing the known trapping trails. Another contributes knowledge of recent animal movements that might have led the trappers to deviate from standard routes. Your son points out likely sheltering locations if the storm caught them by surprise. The search pattern is methodically planned before departure, pairs of searchers taking different routes to maximize coverage while ensuring no one searches alone. Signals are established, specific bird calls that carry well in the frozen air to communicate discoveries or dangers. This wasn't random wandering, but sophisticated search methodology developed over generations of similar emergencies. Archaeological and historical evidence shows that medieval communities had remarkably effective systems for finding lost members, sometimes using physical markers like broken branches arranged in specific patterns to communicate directions or conditions. Your pair heads northeast, following a stream valley frequently used by trappers. The cold is brutally intense, requiring rotation of exposed body parts, alternately covering and uncovering small sections of face to prevent frostbite while maintaining visibility. There, your son suddenly points after nearly an hour of careful searching. Smoke. Through the trees, a faint wisp of smoke rises, nearly invisible against the white sky but detectable to experienced eyes constantly scanning for it. You signal the other search pairs using the agreed-upon bird call, then approach the source with your son. What you find is a classic emergency shelter, not a casual temporary structure, but a desperate survival construction. The missing men have created a snow cave reinforced with branches, its entrance carefully oriented away from the wind and partially blocked with a snow wall. "Hello, the shelter," you call, not wanting to startle the occupants who might react defensively in their vulnerable state. The response is immediate, a weak voice from within. "Help! Jonas is hurt." You and your son carefully approach and find all 3 missing men alive, though in concerning condition. 2 show signs of minor frostbite on fingers as faces. The third, Jonas, has a badly broken leg from falling through ice before the storm hit. His companions had managed extraordinary first aid, stabilizing the broken limb with branches and leather bindings, then constructing the emergency shelter around him when movement became impossible. Their knowledge of survival techniques had kept all 3 alive against overwhelming odds. "We need to get him back without moving the leg too much," your son assesses, examining the crude but effective splint. The other search pairs arrive, having heard your signal. Together you quickly devise a transport solution, using branches to create a drag sled that can support Jonas, while distributing his weight across snow. 1 search pair returns to the village immediately to prepare for the injured man's arrival and bring additional help. The remaining searchers begin the careful process of extracting Jonas from the shelter and securing him to the improvised transport. The trip back is arduous, taking over 2 hours to cover ground that would normally require less than half that time. The extreme cold remains your most dangerous enemy, forcing frequent stops to ensure no one develops dangerous exposure. When your group finally reaches the village outskirts, you're met by several women, including old Agnes, the community's most experienced healer. She immediately takes charge of Jonas's care, directing his transport to the smith's home, where the massive stove provides the most consistent warmth. "You found them just in time," she tells you quietly as others move ahead with the injured man. "Another night out there." She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. The day's drama doesn't end with the rescue. The entire village now faces critical decisions about resource management under extreme cold conditions. With temperatures showing no signs of moderating, fuel consumption will increase dramatically for all households. Food needs will also rise as bodies burn more energy to maintain warmth. The village elder calls a council meeting for late afternoon, once the immediate rescue situation stabilizes. Despite the continuing cold, nearly every household sends a representative to the village centre, where a large fire has been built in the open space. "We need to consolidate," the elder announces without preamble. "Some dwellings have better heat retention than others. Those with the most efficient homes should host additional families until this extreme cold passes." This practice of household consolidation during crisis wasn't uncommon in medieval communities. Church records document formal arrangements where multiple families would temporarily share the most efficient dwelling in their neighborhood, pooling resources and dividing labor to maximize survival chances. Your home with its carefully designed heat retention features, is among those designated to host others. By evening, you're preparing to welcome another family, the young couple whose roof had required emergency bracing after the previous storm. "We'll put the elderly couple on the sleeping platform with our children," your wife plans, arranging the limited space. The young family can use the floor space nearest the fire. The logistics are challenging. 3 households sharing a dwelling designed for one family. But the mathematics of survival is clear. One fire heating a well-insulated space uses significantly less wood than 3 separate dwellings with 3 fires. The body heat of multiple people further reduces fuel needs. As darkness falls, your home is transformed into a multi-family refuge. The elderly couple rests on the sleeping platform with your children. The young family arranges their bedding near the central hearth. You and your wife will take turns maintaining the fire through the night. The conversation as everyone settles is subdued but communal. Information exchanges continue. Who needs what? Who has surplus? How long the cold might last according to various weather signs. Knowledge flows freely between households that might normally interact only occasionally. "Your wall insulation is remarkably effective," comments the young husband, examining your dwelling's construction with professional interest. As a newer village member, he lacks the generations of accumulated building knowledge. "The clay blood mixture," you explain, "makes it more resistant to cracking in severe cold." These technical exchanges weren't just conversation, but critical knowledge transfer that improved community survival over generations. Medieval villages with better knowledge-sharing systems showed significantly higher winter survival rates according to tax and census records. As night deepens and most occupants drift towards sleep, you take the first fire-watching shift. The dwelling is crowded but surprisingly comfortable, the combined body heat of 9 people, raising the interior temperature noticeably. Through the small window, you can see other dwellings where lights still glow. Similar consolidations happening across the village as community members huddle together against the killing cold. This adaptation, the flexibility to reorganize living arrangements in response to crisis, represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of medieval winter survival. Without formal emergency services or central heating, people developed social systems that functioned as effectively as physical infrastructure in preserving life. Your wife joins you by the fire, speaking softly to avoid waking the others. "The young couple's baby will come before spring," she reveals, information shared in the intimate setting of the consolidated household. They were afraid to tell anyone with their home situation so precarious. This information changes your understanding of the young couple's needs. A pregnancy in late winter was both blessing and danger. New life bringing hope but requiring additional resources and protection during the most vulnerable season. "We'll help them strengthen their roof properly when weather allows," you decide. Before the baby arrives. These commitments, informal but binding, created the social fabric that made winter survival possible. Archaeological evidence shows that medieval communities with stronger social bonds had significantly better health outcomes during crisis periods. As midnight approaches, you bank the fire carefully for your wife's watching shift and settle into your sleeping place near the door, the coldest spot, which you've taken to allow others more comfortable positions. Despite the crowding and unusual circumstances, there's a profound sense of security in the shared warmth of the consolidated household. The extreme cold that would kill an isolated individual becomes manageable through collective effort and shared resources. Outside, the temperature continues dropping to levels rarely recorded. Inside, 3 families breathe in synchronized rhythm, their combined presence creating a microclimate of survivable warmth within walls built by generations of accumulated wisdom. You wake to unfamiliar sounds, multiple people breathing, someone shifting on the straw-covered floor, a child's soft murmur. For a moment, disorientation grips you until memory returns. Your home has become a shelter for 3 families riding out the brutal cold snap together. Dawnlight filters weakly through the frost-covered window, casting a bluish glow across the crowded interior. Your wife tends the fire with practiced movements, adding carefully selected pieces of wood to build heat without wasting precious fuel. "How cold?" you ask quietly, joining her by the hearth. "Worse," she whispers. "The water bucket by the door froze solid overnight." "Never seen that inside before." This is an ominous sign. For water to freeze completely inside your well-insulated dwelling means the outside temperature has dropped to levels rarely experienced, the kind of cold that kills livestock in barns and freezes sap inside trees until they split with sounds like gunshots. The young husband from the family sheltering with you stirs, immediately alert in the way of people accustomed to crisis. "I should check our home," he says, reaching for his heaviest outer garments. "Not alone," you caution. "No one goes outside alone in this." This wasn't overprotection, but standard safety protocol during extreme cold. Even short exposures could be fatal if something went wrong. A fall, disorientation, or simply the cold overwhelming a lone person's defenses. "I'll go with him," your son offers, already pulling on additional layers. As the men prepare to venture out, your wife organizes breakfast for the combined household, a thin porridge stretched with extra water to feed more mouths, but heated extremely hot to warm everyone from within. The elderly woman, now recovered from her close brush with freezing, helps distribute the food. "In the winter of my childhood," she tells your daughter, "it got this cold for nearly a month. Half the village moved into the church and stayed there until thaw." These oral histories weren't just conversation, but critical survival information, passing down knowledge about extreme events and successful responses. Archaeological evidence shows that communities with strong oral traditions had better survival rates during climate anomalies. The men return faster than expected, stomping snow from their boots in the entryway. "Villagers gathering at the meeting house," your son reports. "Elder Thomas called everyone. Something about the charcoal burners bringing news." Your family quickly prepares to attend this unexpected meeting. Even in deadly cold, a village gathering means critical information or decisions affecting everyone's survival. Dressing for the short journey requires meticulous attention. Each person wears multiple layers with specific functions. Inner garments of linen to wick moisture, middle layers of wool for insulation, and outer coverings treated with oils or fats for wind resistance. Extremities receive the most attention. Double mittens, wrapped feet, and face coverings that leave only narrow slits for eyes. "Like preparing for battle," the young husband observes as everyone layers up. His observation is surprisingly accurate. Medieval winter clothing functioned much like armor, creating a protective barrier between vulnerable human bodies and lethal environmental conditions. Outside, the cold strikes like a physical blow. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, each inhalation causing a stabbing sensation in your lungs. Even through layers of protection, the temperature difference is immediately apparent. your body heat being drawn away at an alarming rate. The village pathways have been maintained despite the extreme conditions, evidence of the community's disciplined approach to winter survival. Your group moves quickly toward the meeting house, joining streams of similarly bundled figures converging from other directions. The meeting house, larger than any individual dwelling, has been prepared for the gathering. Its central hearth blazes with a substantial fire, and additional heating braziers have been positioned around the perimeter. Even so, the interior is only moderately warmer than outside, the size of the space making it impossible to heat comfortably. Nearly the entire village has assembled despite danger of travel. This alone signals the importance of the meeting. Elder Thomas stands near the central fire with two men in soot-darkened clothing, the charcoal burners who maintain their operation at the forest edge throughout winter. "Everyone here?" Thomas calls over the murmur of conversation. When no objections come, he continues without delay. "Our charcoal burners bring news. A merchant convoy approaches from the South Road. Should reach us by midday." The announcement sends a ripple of excitement through the gathering. Winter merchants were rare, appearing only when travelling conditions allowed and potential profits justified the considerable risks. Their arrival meant new supplies, information from distant places and trading opportunities. "They're stuck at the South Ridge," one charcoal burner adds. "Snow's too deep for their wagons. They need help breaking trail the final distance." This transforms the news from simple excitement to community decision. Helping the merchants means organizing a work party in deadly conditions, risking lives for potential benefits. "We need what they carry," Elder Thomas states plainly. "Salt, iron, news. And they need shelter from this cold. I'm calling for volunteers to help clear their path." You exchange glances with your wife, a silent communication born of years together. Your son steps forward immediately. "I'll go." You join him, along with about 20 other men from various households. The work party quickly organizes, discussing equipment needs and approach strategies. This rapid mobilization wasn't random, but followed patterns established through generations of similar situations. "Bring extra food," your wife tells you, already calculating what can be spared. "The merchants will be hungry." Before departing, the work party gathers necessary tools: wooden shovels with metal-reinforced edges, pry bars for breaking ice, and ropes for safety lines. Each man carries emergency supplies, fire-starting materials, extra mittens, and small food portions. "Stay together," Elder Thomas instructs as you prepare to leave. "No heroes today." The South Ridge lies about an hour's normal walking distance, but current conditions will make the journey considerably longer. Your group departs with urgent purpose, moving in tight formation to maintain collective body heat and safety. The landscape beyond the village paths is transformed into an alien terrain of white drifts and blue shadows. The cold seems to intensify with every step away from shelter, the sun providing light but no perceptible warmth. "Breathing technique," reminds Gunther, the experienced carpenter. "Short inhales through nose, exhale through wrapped mouth." This specific breathing method, developed over centuries of cold weather survival, minimizes lung damage from frigid air while reducing moisture loss from respiration. Modern extreme weather explorers still use similar techniques today. Your group moves steadily southward, breaking trail through snow that sometimes reaches thigh depth. The work is exhausting, requiring rotation of the lead position every few minutes to prevent any individual becoming dangerously overexerted. There, your son points after nearly 2 hours of difficult travel. Smoke. On the horizon, barely visible against the white sky, thin smoke columns rise, the merchants' camp where they've halted their progress. Your group approaches to find 5 wagons arranged in a protective circle. The merchants have created a remarkably effective temporary camp, using the wagons as windbreaks around a central fire. Canvas stretched between vehicles creates additional shelter, and the draft animals stand huddled in the most protected area. Villagers approaching, calls a watchman upon spotting your group. A man emerges from the largest wagon, clearly the lead merchant by his relatively fine clothing despite obvious travel wear. "Well met," he calls. "We feared we might freeze in place here." The merchant introduces himself as Martin of Bristol, a long-distance trader specializing in winter routes between larger settlements. His operation is impressive. 5 wagons with goods ranging from salt and iron tools to luxuries like southern cloth and spices. "We need to break trail for your wagons," you explain. "How are your draft animals faring?" "Exhausted but alive," Martin replies. "They can manage if the path is cleared." The work begins immediately, your village group joining with the merchant's men to create a passable route. The approach is systematic, first marking the most direct line to the village, then breaking the deep snow using long poles, followed by shoveling to create a packed surface the wagons can navigate. Despite the bitter cold, the labour generates enough body heat to require careful management of clothing layers. Overheating leads to sweating, which quickly becomes deadly when activity stops. Experienced winter workers know to open garments during exertion, then immediately reseal everything when resting. The sky has turned gunmetal grey by the time the path is sufficiently cleared, daylight already waning though it's barely past midday. Northern winter days were brutally short, providing limited working hours before darkness brought additional dangers. "We should move immediately," urges Martin, eyeing the darkening sky, "before it freezes harder or more snow comes." The merchants harness their draft animals, massive oxen whose breath creates clouds of steam in the frigid air. The beasts lumber forward reluctantly, requiring constant encouragement from their handlers. Your work party divides, with half leading the way and half following behind to assist if wagons become stuck. Progress is painfully slow, each wagon navigating the narrow packed trail with inches to spare on either side. Halfway to the village, one wagon slides partially off the packed surface, its wheels sinking into softer snow. Immediately, men position themselves to push, while others bring the oxen around to pull at a better angle. "Heave together," calls the wagon's driver. 1, 2, 3. The coordinated effort succeeds in rocking the wagon back onto the packed trail. This scene repeats several times during the journey, each potential disaster averted through immediate collective response. The village comes into view as true darkness approaches, its scattered lights appearing as warm beacons in the gathering gloom. The sight visibly energizes the merchants and their animals, pace quickening despite growing exhaustion. Elder Thomas has organized the village well in your absence. As the merchant caravan enters the settlement, they're directed to specific locations. Wagons positioned near the meeting house, draft animals led to sheltered areas where fodder has been prepared, merchants themselves guided to households designated to host them. Martin of Bristol is assigned to your home, an honour reflecting your family's reliable dwelling and established hosting capacity, with the other families already sheltering there. Your village is remarkably well organized, Martin comments as he enters your home, stamping snow from his boots in the entryway. Many settlements this size fall into chaos during such weather. The observation is perceptive. Medieval communities varied dramatically in their winter survival rates based largely on social organization rather than just physical resources. Court and church records document these differences, with well-organized villages showing significantly lower mortality, even with similar material conditions. Your now expanded household settles into evening routine, the merchant adding another dimension to the already complex social arrangement. Martin proves a valuable guest, sharing news from distant places while respectfully observing local customs. The cold extends far south this year, he informs everyone as you share the evening meal. 3 large towns have lost buildings to fire as people push their hearths beyond safe limits trying to stay warm. This information provides important context. Your village's struggles are part of a regional pattern, not a local failure. Historical records show that understanding the broader context of hardship often helped communities maintain morale during crisis periods. As darkness deepens outside, conversation turns to what Martin carries in his wagons. Beyond practical necessities like salt and iron, he mentions luxuries that seem almost otherworldly in your current circumstances. Southern fruits preserved in honey, fine cloth from distant cities, small mirrors of polished metal. We'll open trading tomorrow if weather permits, he explains, though I'm also authorized to extend credit to villages with good reputation, payable after spring planting. This credit system was a sophisticated economic adaptation to seasonal realities. Archaeological and documentary evidence shows extensive networks of delayed payment arrangements that helped communities survive resource bottlenecks during winter. The evening continues with something rare in deepest winter: entertainment. Martin, like most successful merchants, is also a skilled storyteller. He shares tales from his travels, some clearly embellished, but all containing useful information about distant places and different survival strategies. In the far north, he tells his rapt audience, they build entire houses from snow blocks, warmer inside than you'd believe possible. These cultural exchanges weren't merely entertainment, but vital knowledge transfer networks. Medieval communities with better connections to trade routes showed more rapid adoption of survival innovations from other regions. Eventually, exhaustion claims even the most interested listeners. Your expanded household prepares for sleep, arranging sleeping spaces with practiced efficiency despite the crowded conditions. Your home design is exceptional, Martin comments quietly as you bank the fire for night. The double-door entry, the ceiling height variation for heat management, the storage integration. I've seen wealthy manors with less effective winter adaptations. His observation highlights a fascinating truth. Medieval peasant housing in extreme northern regions often employed more sophisticated environmental management techniques than more advanced structures elsewhere. Survival necessity drove innovation more effectively than wealth or status. Knowledge accumulated over generations, you explain. Each feature exists because its absence killed someone in winters past. As the household settles for sleep, you find yourself reflecting on this accumulated wisdom, the true foundation of winter survival. Every aspect of your dwelling, from the carefully selected hillside location to the precisely angled roof, represents lessons learned through centuries of struggle against deadly cold. The walls surrounding your expanded household tonight aren't just physical barriers, but repositories of cultural knowledge. Each log, each handful of insulating moss, each carefully designed joint encoding solutions discovered by ancestors whose names are long forgotten. Outside, the temperature continues its brutal descent, the cold so intense it seems to have physical substance, a predator stalking the darkness for any vulnerability, any momentary lapse in vigilance or preparation. Inside, 3 families plus a traveller breathe the shared air of a space designed to capture and preserve the most precious winter resource, heat. The combined warmth of multiple bodies supplements the carefully managed fire, creating a microclimate of survivable conditions within the deadly winter night. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, trading with merchants, continued extreme cold management, ongoing resource calculations as winter stretches toward an eventual but distant spring. Each day will require the same careful attention, the same application of generations-old knowledge to immediate problems. Yet in this moment, as sleep approaches, there's a profound sense of accomplishment, not just in surviving another winter day, but in participating in humanity's oldest continuous endeavour, the passing of life-saving knowledge from one generation to the next. The shelter around you isn't just a structure, but a physical manifestation of this knowledge transfer, a technology perfected not through formal science, but through the accumulated observation and adaptation of countless lives lived at the edge of survival. As consciousness fades, your last awareness is of the contrast between the deadly stillness outside and the gentle rhythms of breathing within, each exhale contributing to the shared warmth, each person's presence making survival more likely for all. In the darkest season, in the coldest night, the medieval winter shelter achieves its perfect function, transforming the impossible into the survivable through nothing more than human ingenuity applied across generations. And as you drift into sleep,